Out of all the hours that I have in TF2, by far the class that I've played the most is Pyro. I couldn't tell you exactly what it is that makes him so fun to me, but I attribute a large part of why I main him to his weapons. A lot of them meant for combos like the Degreaser and Flare Gun just feel really good in a way that a lot of other TF2 classes just don't. However, despite having some winners, I do think he has the most amount of terrible weapons out of every class in TF2. Stuff like the Hot Hand, the Sharpened Volcano Fragment, and the Gas Passer are the big standouts, but even on top of that, there are still a lot of mediocre weapons that you just never want to use. So naturally, because of how much I've played him, I have a lot of different opinions on how all of his weapons should be rebalanced. But today, those aren't the opinions that I want to talk about, because I thought it would be even more interesting to ask for your opinions. A good while ago, I put out a community post asking my community for any ideas that they had on how to rebalance or redesign any of Pyro's weapons they wanted. The only requirement is that the ideas had to be serious. And out of the over 1,000 responses that I got, holy hell, I have to say that overall, I think there were a lot of cool ones in there. They weren't all cool, there were definitely some goofier ones in there too, but overall, I think they were all really cool for discussion, so that's what I want to do. Go through the 50 or so ideas that I picked out and fully break down why I either think they're a good idea or not. You'll also notice too that throughout the video I gave each weapon a rating out of 5. This is meant to represent how well the idea would actually work in TF2, but I think I put a little bit too much emphasis on it when actually talking about the weapons because it's pretty arbitrary and doesn't actually affect my analysis. But anyway, this is a pretty long one to say the least, so I won't waste any more of your time. Let's break down all of your proposed changes for Pyro weapons together. So before we start talking about specific weapon changes, let's talk about the changes that people had to Pyro himself. These are either like class passives or pretty broad sweeping changes that apply to a lot of his weapons. Really, these are anything that I couldn't classify into like a single weapon discussion. So general Pyro change number 1, critical hits with weapons that apply afterburn apply critical afterburn, which burns for 3 times as long. This would give the Axtinguisher, Flare Gun, but also the Sharpened Volcano Fragment, I guess, a massive buff. Could legitimately open the door for full, long-range, and combo Pyro to be more viable, on top of making Pyro more threatening beyond 2 feet away. Okay, so this is one of those changes where, like, I can see your vision, but think about what this would do for a little bit. And I don't know if I could fully get on board with this one. Because consider, first of all, what happens when you get hit by, like, a long-range crit flare already. You take 90 damage from any range, and then you take 8 seconds of afterburn, which is another 64 damage. So if you're a light class and you don't find healing, 1 crit flare is already enough to guaranteed kill you. Like, that's already a ton. You're already rewarded pretty handily for landing a crit flare. If you got 3 times the normal afterburn, though, that's like over 200 damage just from afterburn. That's a lot. I don't really think if a heavy gets hit by a crit flare, he has some kind of like immediate responsibility to find healing, or otherwise he's going to lose all 300 of its health. That's insane. But then also imagine like you get tickled by the little edge of the explosion radius by a crit Scorch Shot flare, and you also take 200 total damage from afterburn, and you're on fire for a total of what, like 25 seconds? Like, I don't think that's something that people really need to deal with in a game like TF2. Again, I can understand the idea of like, oh, well, if the initial hit does 3x damage, why not have the afterburn deal 3x damage too? And I think the actual reason that I'd give for that is that, at least in my opinion, the way that I interpret the design of Pyro, afterburn dealing a ton of damage isn't really the point. It's to encourage people to find healing. It's to put some pressure on them first and foremost, but also it's to set people up from combos. And even then, if you've already been on fire for 8 seconds and you can't follow up with a combo in that amount of time, like the extra 10 probably aren't going to help you much. That means that enemy's probably already long gone. So yeah, again, I can understand why you would think about this, but like considering how this would work in the game at all, like please don't. That sounds miserable to play against as any other class. Oh, and also this time around, I'm going to give each one a rating out of 5 in terms of like how much I personally think this should be in the game. This one I will probably give a 1 because again, I don't see the joy in some Pyro firing a random crit detonator and exploding it on the very edge of the afterburn radius, and then you are now taking fire damage for like 25 seconds. That's not cool. Pyro's Air Blast should have a push force penalty as he spams it on enemy players. Say you get the first Air Blast push as you normally would, but doing another push within 3 to 5 seconds of the first will only send the enemy half as far. A third push sends a quarter, and a fourth push would basically do nothing. Stops Pyro from stuffing Ubers as easily. Ooh, so actually I would agree that one of the nerfs that probably would benefit Pyro as a whole is making it so you can't just hold M2 on people and carry them across the map without them really being able to do anything. I don't really mind a single air blast being able to like jostle enemies pretty easily. I think it's fine that Pyro can do that, but yeah, just being able to hold it down and you continuously get the same benefit is a little bit much. In terms of the exact numbers you listed, I don't know about that. I don't know if like a second air blast only sending half as far is what I would say. Maybe if it's like on the same enemy, where it's like if I air blast 2 enemies in a row, then they each get treated as if it's the first air blast, and then that's probably fine. Or maybe it's like if I'm holding down air blast that I've not given it like proper time to cool off, then like the second one does 80% and then the third one does like 60% or something like that. I think those are a lot more tame ways to balance it, because like half as far is not even as far as the shortstop. Like that does basically nothing. So that should be, I don't know, reserved for more extreme circumstances. And because of that, I don't know if I can like fully give this one a 5 out of 5, but I will give it a 4 because yeah, in concept, this is a pretty good way to nerf Pyro and is one of the very few things that like I legitimately do think is a problematic feature of the class. Now, the one thing that I will add to this is that I do think it is important for Pyro to be able to stuff Ubers at least a little bit. This isn't really in regards to like this change. I think this is like a fine way to do it. But I do see a lot of people that think it's bullshit that Ubered players can get air blasted at all, and I mean, it's kind of tangential to this one, but it did make me think of this, where I don't agree with that. I think if you have full invulnerability, there's gotta be at least something to slow you down, kind of. I do agree that, like, again, Pyro holding M2 and then just deleting the entire Uber that you work to build is a little much. You really shouldn't be able to do that, but there's got to be something to at least impede progress a little bit outside of just, what, like, Fists of Steel heavy body blocking for as long as he can. So, yeah, I'll bring that up, even though that doesn't really affect, like, how I'm rating this one at all. All flamethrowers get the Dragon Fury Airb Past recharge. So for those that aren't aware, this is in reference to the fact that the air blast on the Dragon's Fury is 50% slower than normal. I don't know why I bring that up as if it's like this hidden game mechanic. It's a feature of the weapon. But the idea is that every flamethrower would have a 50% slower air blasting speed. So the reason that I rally so hard against air blast speed nerfs in general is because of the way that Soldier and Demo are designed in TF2, especially in like a 12v12 setting where there's just more players to contend with at any given time. Against most classes in the game, not only in a 1v1 scenario, but really at any range in any scenario, especially in groups, the Soldier and Demo are rewarded for just holding M1 and unloading as many explosives as they possibly can into a crowd of enemies. Rockets are pretty easy to aim. They're not the fastest, but they travel an unlimited distance in a straight line. They have a pretty big explosion, and in the majority of cases, it's really, really easy for Soldier to get a lot of reward without really having to do much, which is why I think it's very healthy for TF2 to have a class that doesn't let Soldier just hold M1 and get shit tons of damage. He's now able to reflect the rockets that are coming his way to send them back at the Soldier, which then forces that Soldier to turn his brain on and actually, like, intellectually engage with the interaction. And for clarification too, by the way, I play a lot of Soldier. I have almost as many hours on Soldier as I do Pyro, so I'm not just saying this as like a biased Pyro main. Like, I agree that when I'm just being a little fucking goober and spamming rockets into a point and a Pyro reflects it, it's deserved, right? But the only reason Pyro can actually be an effective counter there is because Air Blast fires at the exact same speed of the rocket launcher. So if the Soldier's holding down M1, all the Pyro has to do is hold down M2, and there you go. You prevent that Soldier from brainlessly playing, and now, again, he has to try to bait out an Air Blast, or use his shotgun, or if he has like a different secondary equipped, well, now there's an actual downside to not running the shotgun, which I kind of think there should be because the banners are broken. But now think about what happens in a world where Pyro has a much longer air blast cooldown. The first rocket the soldier fires is equally as risky because the Pyro has the same chance of reflecting it back at him. But even if he lands the reflect, the soldier's only taking up to like 150 damage, which is not all of his health. And then he gets to land a second rocket completely for free because the Pyro is on cooldown at that point. But what's even worse is that there's now a good chance that by continuing to hold M1 and firing a third rocket will also work because the Pyro's air blast is out of sync completely. And I can personally tell you, as someone that's been on both ends of this interaction a lot of times, one of the fastest ways for a Pyro to lose against a soldier is for his air blast to be out of sync with the firing of the rockets. But that would now be the case for every single Pyro versus soldier interaction ever, and you wouldn't even have the extra damage from the Dragon's Fury to compensate. So no, I don't think that just arbitrarily crippling Pyro's ability to deal with soldier is a good idea. Again, I can see why someone would say this. It's like they get air blasted, spammed one too many times, and they're like, okay, this is kind of bullshit. But I think there are better ways to handle that than like making air blast itself slower, because that has a lot of second order effects that I just don't think would make the game better. So I will rate this change a 2 out of 5 because it's not completely stupid, but it wouldn't be good. Pyro as a whole should get the same passive blast jump resistance as Soldier and Demo Man, both a buff for the Detonator and those crazy people who can hit reflect jumps. This one overall is honestly a pretty agreeable change. I think if you are insane enough to go for a reflect jump, which is a really, really hard and situational thing to do as it is, you shouldn't be penalized by losing like half of your health. If the soldier can do the same thing and only lose 40, you should not be losing like 85. As far as it pertains to the Detonator, I think that's kind of a different discussion because the Detonator actually goes out of its way to like artificially increase the amount of damage you're taking, which again, we'll get there. I know for a fact there are some changes about the Detonator on here, so that's a discussion for later than now. But again, in terms of doing this for reflect jumping and even for the Detonator, like, I agree, this should be one that's added. 5 out of 5 change. Good job. Here's a more extreme version of the other one. Rework all of Pyro's flamethrowers to function like the Dragon's Fury. This does not mean they all have the exact same stats or mechanics as the Dragon's Fury. This means all of the flamethrowers fire bursts of flame so the Pyro fits better into TF2's overall design philosophy. I must emphasize that the air blast penalty on the Dragon's Fury will not apply to the other flamethrowers, which, I mean, makes sense. It is like a separate listed stat. Additionally, remove the air blast penalty on the Dragon's Fury when you successfully reflect a projectile, which is not what I'm going to be rating this one around because there's a much more interesting discussion, but that on its own is based and is actually one that I've had in my personal rebalance list for a very long time. Anyway, this is a discussion that I've seen floating around the community for a very long time in the attempt to make Pyro a much more skill-based class. For those that still don't know what this means that all of the flamethrowers keep their listed stats on the weapon, but they use the weapon base of the Dragon's Fury, which the hard part about judging this is that basically every single thing the Dragon's Fury does is listed on the weapon, so I'm not sure which stats would and wouldn't carry over. For instance, like firing a fireball, I think most people would agree that that is one that would like universally apply now. But what about gaining a faster firing speed on repeated hits? Is that something that's like part of the base weapon type or just something the Dragon's Fury does separately? Or what about fireballs doing 3 times damage to burning enemies? Because if that's not the case, if that's a Dragon's Fury specific one, this would suck. Doing 25 damage per hit is abysmal. So we kind of have to keep that one, I guess, but we'll maybe say the repressurization rate that increases on hit is like the Dragon's Fury specific one. But anyway, all that to say that this is a rebalance that you could kind of interpret in a lot of different ways, so I'll give a soft rating on this one, I guess. But that's generally what people are getting at, is a way to make all of the flamethrowers more skill-based by requiring them to land a fireball instead of just spraying flames everywhere to deal damage. So immediately, I think the problem that I would find with this is that the Dragon's Fury very specifically is designed around the fact that it does what it does. If you didn't have the increased firing rate on hit, even if you kept the triple damage to burning enemies, I honestly don't think it would be that good. Like, you can already get very similar amounts of damage via WM1, and the damage itself isn't that high from WM1. It's, like, respectable, but it's not great. So I do think that the extra damage from like repeatedly chaining hits together is something that you should have if you're now forcing players to aim every single hit and that don't even have like splash radii or whatever. But we'll just like hand wave that away and say that like maybe the numbers are tweaked such that like the other flamethrowers are better at their jobs, whatever. Let me think. How would porting the existing flamethrowers work if you just made them the Dragon's Fury weapon type instead? And again, we just assume that they don't have the like faster recharge speed on hit or the slower air blast speed, and that's the only things that they don't have. Stock would probably be a little bit worse because you'd lose the consistency from like applying little tufts of fire. The other thing that the fireball weapons have included by default, by the way, is a way lower afterburn duration. So anything that relies on building afterburn, like extinguishers. Okay, well, just extinguishers, really. I guess afterburn itself is something that does damage, but you would lose a lot of that. That would become a lot worse because it would be, number one, harder to apply, and you would get a lot less reward for actually doing so. The other thing that I'll bring up, too, with this is that the Dragon's Fury has a repressurization mechanic, which I would say is pretty essential to the weapon type to make it function. And what it does is it basically makes it so you can't perform two actions immediately one after another. So for instance, like with the normal flamethrowers, you can apply flames and then air blast while you're applying flames and have that happen basically instantly afterward. With the Dragon's Fury, though, there's a noticeable delay after you fire a fireball in which you can air blast. And that matters because at point blank, if you want to try to predict or reflect, timing it based on when your flames start to deal damage is a really easy indicator to hit it more times than not. So you would lose a pretty important part of the Pyro versus Soldier matchup if you did that, but I don't know if that's like a completely make or break thing for the idea, but it is something to be aware of nonetheless that I wouldn't really be happy with if that was in the game. Let's see, the Degreaser is pretty much the same thing as stock in terms of how it would change. The Flog is interesting, and is actually one that, I guess to give some spoilers, I've had on my rebalance ideas document for a while in terms of stuff that I want to put in the inevitable Pyro rebalance weapons video, or whatever you'd call it, because I do think that the extra damage is a lot more fair if you actually have to hit someone to get it, and can't just wave your mouse around like you have Parkinson's Deluxe and immediately kill the entire enemy team. I think it just makes a lot more sense for the Flog to be a fireball weapon type in general. So again, spoilers, but yeah, I think the Flog, if anything, would benefit from that. The Backburner could benefit, but it would be really dependent on how the hit detection would pan out. And overall, like, I don't know, I think it's just kind of a whatever change for it. And then obviously the Dragon's Fury is already the Dragon's Fury. So overall, I think this is one that would be interesting to test, but there's a lot of stuff you would have to revise about the fireball weapon type as a whole before I would be comfortable with this just being the norm for Pyro. And honestly, I think it's fine to have at least one weapon that's like kind of a brainless close-range threat. Maybe if you wanted to make its damage worse in comparison, I wouldn't complain about that, but like, I don't mind having something that easily applies fire as long as like that's not your only source of damage. Mainly just for stuff like Degreaser combos, right? Like, it's really easy to puff someone and have the flames linger and be guaranteed that your follow-up hits are gonna, like, get the crits or whatever, rather than shoot a fireball and then go all in just expecting it to hit when you're already taking a risk. Like, the risk is not necessarily the aiming in that regard. I don't think that's a necessary step to add to the process. Anyway, I'm kind of rambling with this one. Overall, I will give it a 3 out of 5. I think that, again, it's something that I'd want to see done, but I don't think it's like something that I'd be immediately excited about until I'm confident that it would work. And last up for general Pyro changes, this is 3 different ones baked into one. Well, kind of 2, because one of them is like a specific weapon rebalance that doesn't have anything to do with the other 2, but these are at least like pretty universal ones that I think are interesting, if nothing else. So looking at the first 2, number 1 is increasing Pyro's base movement speed from 300 to 310 hammer units per second, which for context is like in between his current speed and like medic speed. I don't really know if you would notice this ever, but sure, it's a quality of life thing for the times you're chasing a sniper in a straight line, I guess. But then second is a faster base weapon swap speed by 20%, which means that all of his weapons swap in 0.4 seconds instead of 0.5. This one, I'm a lot more on board with. I kind of think it's silly, to be completely honest, that the Degreaser is the only weapon that gives, like, combo potential. I think there's a lot of stuff you could do with Pyro's kit in terms of designing weapons if one of his class passives was that he switched weapons faster by default, so you wouldn't have to run the Degreaser, and you could afford to experiment with stuff like the Dragon's Fury more. Would 20% be enough to really move the needle on this? Like, probably not. Again, this is kind of a nothing one, and I would rather commit to one of these than giving him a little bit of both, between the two, I mean, increasing Pyro's movement speed, I wouldn't do that. Just because, like, he already does present a pretty big threat when he does get into range, and if we wanted to increase his mobility, I would rather increase it in very bursty ways, like making Detonator better, making Thermal Thruster a little bit more accessible, rather than just making him run at you faster so he can WM1 more efficiently. Like, that's probably the worst way to do it. So yeah, between this one and a faster weapon switch speed, I definitely just commit to weapon switch speed, and maybe make it a little bit higher than 20%, maybe like 30 or even 40 if you wanted to get crazy wild with it. But yeah, no, overall, I'll rate this change in its totality at like a 3 out of 5, because if you just slapped this into the game, again, even though he doesn't need the extra movement speed, this is low enough that it probably wouldn't break anything, and I think it would probably improve him because it would be the faster weapon switch too, so sure. Alrighty, moving on to primaries. We'll start with, we'll say the Backburner. There are a lot of interesting Backburner ones. First of all, pretty short, sweet, and simple. Making the Backburner Air Blast only take 40 ammo instead of 50 would be a nice change, since then it's just a doubled cost from stock. So I hate to reveal my hand too much here, but this is another one that I have in my balance video that's coming up. It's a good change, though. I think 50 is a bit extreme, because even though, like, in concept, I agree that having 4 air blasts instead of 10 is, like, a suitable nerf for how much potential damage you can get from the Backburner, in reality, you're not getting 4 air blasts, like, ever. If you use your flames one time, you now get 3, because you're below the threshold to get the 4th one. So, in reality, it's like you're getting 2 to 3 air blasts instead of, like, 7 to 8 or so. And I think that's a bit harsh. I would like it if Pyro actually got 4 full air blasts and is able to use his flames, and yeah, just slightly bumping up the numbers, great. 5 out of 5 change, good job. And I'll talk a little bit more about why I think the Backburner needs that kind of change in my rebalance video, but in general, I do think it's just a little bit too polarizing and too inconsistent, and this would help iron it out a little bit, so. Give the Backburner's Air Blast knockback on self, which acts like the Detonator, but without the damage in exchange for less distance for mobility. So, for those unaware, Fishstick on a Stick actually did a very similar rebalance idea that he implemented into a server that he called Air Blast Jumping. Now, the Backburner wasn't the only flamethrower to have this. I think every single one of them did. And instead of being limited by ammo, I think they were on a meter, I think. I would have to talk to him about it, because I think it's been a while since he's, like, had that change live. But in general, he found that it was useful, but very powerful. Like, he had to put a lot of constraints on it to make it, like, a reasonable thing for Pyro to have. And I think, like, honestly, I don't hate the Backburner of all flamethrowers being, like, the only one to have it, because you'd only get a couple, and it does really appreciate, like, being closer to enemies, because it does have, like, a WM1 function that's constrained by position. So yeah, out of all the flamethrowers to do this with, like, sure, the Backburner is the one that I would agree with the most. And out of all of the ways to do it, an air blast jump is, like, I don't know, the most sensible one. Again, it's one of those ones where I would really want to see it tested before I, like, hard committed to saying, like, this is a good change. So I'll give the fence sitter take of a 3 out of 5. Overall, though, I think the idea of a flamethrower in general being more centered around mobility is a good thing. I would like Pyro to have one of those for sure. Okay, actually, you know what? I'll bump it up to a 3.5, because this does make, like, pretty good sense. It's just like, ooh, I'd want to see it tested before I could say, like, this would not be abysmal dog shit to play against. Rather than push, I think the Backburner should pull. It isn't great for reflection, so maybe improving its ability to single out targets would do it some good. Okay, so the thing that I think of immediately with this is that you're playing on Ghost Fort and you sit on the little platform. You just, like, suck people, like, toward you and then they fall in the hole. That doesn't, like, affect my balance change. That's just, like, the picture that comes to my mind when you talk about, like, sucking people as Pyro. Or, like, with the air blast, sorry. That was actually not an intentional choice of words, believe it or not. But I kind of see the vision here. I think the problem that I'd have with this, though, is that there are way fewer instances where you need to get someone immediately in your face than away from you in the direction of your choosing. Picture what you're doing with Air Blast. You're pushing someone into a wall, you're pushing someone off a cliff, you're, I don't know, pushing them, like, in the air so you can set them up for, like, a flare combo or something. But you lose a lot of that flexibility if the only direction it sends is directly toward you. And with the Backburner especially, it's like the Air Blast range is pretty comparable to the range of Flames, so you wouldn't really be gaining anything by air blasting someone toward you, because either they're already looking at you, and then that's kind of a bad deal. You don't really want them to be point blank like that. It makes, like, reflects harder. It makes scouts, like, insta-kill you, basically. Or if they're looking away from you, well, then you can just burn them. You don't even have to waste the 50 ammo to get them near you a lot of the time. Just walk at them and burn them, and they're gonna dissolve. So I do think a pull mechanic has potential, kind of. But I also do think it's, like, an abject nerf to whatever weapon that it's on and should be considered, like, a downside that the weapon is designed around, and this doesn't really do anything for the Backburner, honestly, so I'll rate this one, like, a 2 out of 5. It has potential, but I don't think this, like, should be in the game as you listed it. Make the Backburner's hitbox for the back 20% larger. So, this is one that conceptually I 100% agree with. And as I will get to in the balance video, 20% larger doesn't really mean anything because the way that it calculates back hits is really obtuse. But yeah, making the back hitbox larger is, I think, one of the biggest things the weapon could use. Honestly, like, if you had to pick one stat to give it, just do that, and I could live with the increased air blast cost. Just make the crits actually work when you'd think they would. Because right now, it's a little stingy. Like, you could be directly behind someone on your screen, and then you just don't get crits for no reason. So yeah, make him better. I've got a rework for the Backburner. It keeps the crits on back shot up. But instead of increasing air blast cost, it deals 33 less damage on a frontal assault. Well, if there is one change that I want to see the Backburner get, it's adopting this as official terminology, because I really want to see the words frontal assault damage and back shot up damage in the game. That would be awesome. Now, in terms of the actual stats in the game, if we don't pair this with a back increase, or the back size increase anyway, don't do this, because then it's basically a flamethrower with a 33% damage penalty. The back shot up crits are great and all, but you're not really getting them that often, and I honestly do like the air blast penalty is, like, conceptually for the design of the Backburner, because it does force you to take advantage of the strengths more, because you can't just, like, run at people and then rely on air blast to get you out of sticky situations. So I do think it, like, the downside does change the way you use the weapon interestingly enough to where I would keep that over a damage penalty, but yeah, it's like, again, I could see why you'd say this, but I don't agree. So I will leave it as a 2 out of 5 for my rating, because backshot up is funny, and also frontal assault's pretty good too. Right-clicking with the Backburner fires a firework with a projectile that's similar to the Rap Assassin, but with burn instead of bleed. Okay, so in the scope of rebalancing TF2 weapons, there's one sort of change that is a big pet peeve of mine, and that is the change that I will term as, what does this do for the weapon at all? Where, like, the weapon is otherwise conceptually fine, and it just feels like something that's slapped on top of it because, fuck it, why not? And this definitely fits into that category. I don't know why you would need a firework with a projectile that's basically just like a flare. Like, you could say it's the Rap Assassin with burn instead of bleed, but that's just a flare. Okay, I guess, like, is this in addition to the air blast or in replacement of? Because if it just replaces it, that sucks. That would be horrible. if it's in addition to it, it's like, okay, but why? why do we need that at all? So I appreciate the concept. I think it's a fun thing to think about, and I appreciate you submitting it, but I just don't think for the Backburner this would do like anything. So I'm gonna give this a 1 out of 5. I'm sorry. And finally, for the Backburner, make the Backburner mini crits in an area slightly wider from the crit hitbox. This is purely a buff because I like the Backburner and also would offset latency errors, robbing me of my deserved crits. Okay, so believe it or not, this was another change kind of that I had in my my rebalance doc. So cool to see that I'm on the same wavelength with a lot of people that are submitting stuff. Honestly, okay, here's the deal. Again, this is another one I'll have to say, just watch the other video when it comes out because I'll talk about it more. But I like this as a way to make the Backburner more consistent without making it just like a giant crit area, I guess. Sorry, that was a giant jumbling of words there. But full crits on the flamethrower is insane. That melts people really fast, and you're treading a very, very fine line when you increase the size of the back hitbox, because if you make it even a little bit too big, well, now people just suddenly dissolve from a pyro they didn't even know was there before they have a chance to react, and yeah, you need to have it limited to some extent. But having like a quote-unquote forgiveness hitbox that just deals mini crits that's on the outside of that still rewards you for good positioning, but not as much as like getting directly behind them. So this is a good change. Like, this is honestly, out of everything I would do to the Backburner, this is probably like number 2. If you're not going to just increase the crit size, adding a mini crit range on top of that is like a really good idea. Again, 5 out of 5 change. I totally don't say because I thought of it too, although, again, in my defense, like, if I didn't think it was a good change, I wouldn't have, like, kept it for my own stuff, so. Alright, moving on to the Degreaser. Have the Degreaser make it so every weapon has a faster switch speed just by having it equipped. So, this is how it used to work, and I don't know why they made it not work like this anymore. I don't know what was so overpowered about flare gun into Axtinguisher combos that Valve decided that wasn't a thing you could do anymore. Or if you want to get like really creative, like Sharpened Volcano Fragment into flare gun. That's a really cool combo. It's like not very good, obviously, but if you had the Degreaser, it would actually be pretty quick to do that. And Valve just took it out of the game for no reason. So yeah, 6 out of 5 change. This is seriously one of the few that I'm giving a 6 out of 5. I'm not even kidding. This needs to be in the game. Like, I will go out of my way to email Valve about this one rather than just saying it's a really good idea. So yes, please do this. Seriously, there's so many cool combos that they ruined just because you can't switch to your secondary and melee quickly. And I don't know why. There's no point. And also, if you just make it deploy and holster speed, sometimes it bugs out, which isn't the problem if it's just universal. Like, if you like swap back and forth really fast, which sometimes you do need to do, or if you swap and then like hold M1 on your flamethrower, sometimes it doesn't fire immediately, and I don't know why. Okay, sorry, you put a Degreaser change in here. I'm gonna get worked up about it. Add a faster air blast cooldown to the Degreaser. I found it weird how so many flamethrowers have worse air blast in exchange for other stats, but none go the other way. This would also pair well with its combo utility. Ooh, okay, so as an outright buff, this would be one that's honestly kind of a hard sell for very similar reasons that I pointed out in the air blast, like, power on repeated air blasts penalty change earlier. There's a sentence in there somewhere. You can figure out what it was. But the idea is that I don't like that people can just hold M2 and send you to Mars without them really having much say in the matter. And I know that based on how the new air blast mechanics work, you can like stack the power of 2 air blasts and they multiply together. And the reason that I know that is because in TF2 times 10, when air blast is just a machine gun, it sends people like all the way into the Kuiper belt. So I would wonder if like you increased the speed even a little bit, if you would kind of have a similar outcome where you can just kind of launch people across the map. But even if not, just again, running at people holding M2 with even faster push speed would really necessitate some kind of like nerf to repeated air blast. In terms of projectiles reflecting, that one's a lot harder for me to decide on because, okay, in concept, I actually do like the idea of a flamethrower that air blasts at the same speed as a grenade launcher, just to prevent demos from spamming that, because It's always kind of frustrated me how Demo can just get away with pipe spamming and Pyro can't really do anything about it. You just kind of have to back off. So honestly, yeah, sure. Again, maybe like make it so you only get the extra speed if you actually hit the reflect, just so you can't hold the M1 and then have a better time against soldiers even when they're not firing. I don't know. Anyway, this is such a hard one because it would really depend on how much faster you made it. But I'm only giving it a 3 out of 5 just on its own because you would really have to compensate that with nerfs elsewhere for that to even be close to balanced. Have the Dragon's Fury projectile properly line up, and instead of removing the air blast penalty, have such only happen if you fail to air blast somebody or reflect a projectile. Punishing just air blasting wildly whenever you happen to see a soldier instead of always punishing you, and changing the offset of the projectile to more properly line up could make it feel like a more consistent to use. It's a good weapon and great alternative playstyle. I simply hate being punished for actually hitting a reflect or even extinguishing a teammate. Okay, so with the idea of removing the air blast penalty and only having it apply when you miss a reflect or like don't do anything with the air blast, I like that a lot, honestly. I don't know why that wasn't on the weapon to begin with. It fits thematically. It really makes the matchup against Soldier not just a complete like chud matchup for Pyro where nothing ever happens and you just eat rockets and die. And yeah, that on its own is a 5 out of 5, so cool. What I'm not sure about is what you mean by changing the offset of the projectile to more properly line up. Like, are you implying that you make it a centered projectile like the original? Because if that is the case, I don't know, like, if I've ever had a problem with that. Like, I don't use the Dragon's Fury a ton. I do use it more than people expect for how much of a reputation I got by saying it's slightly not my third best choice in one of my videos. Seriously, people think that I despise this weapon. I really don't. I enjoy it. I just think it has some problems that turn me off from it sometimes. But in the times that I've used it, the projectile not being centered is never something that I've noticed. Is this like a problem that people have with that? I'm not sure. In general, I'm just gonna nod my head and agree with you because, like, I'm sure consistency buffs of any kind would really help the weapon. There are some pieces of jank that I've not quite been able to articulate, so maybe that's one of them, but I don't know. This is the first time I've ever heard about this, so. Small changes. Give the Dragon's Fury its gas meter so you know when you can air blast again since it was unused, and sometimes the game will bug and let you see it. Which, for those unaware, there is a little meter in your HUD that looks like any other, like, projectile, throwable, rechargeable meter that just shows you what the current, like, pressurization, I guess is the proper term, of the Dragon's Fury is, so cool. Which I'm not sure why they even removed that to begin with. I think they did physically model the gauge on the weapon to show you the accurate progress of it, but why? Like, okay, you're not gonna see that. Just give me the fucking HUD. I don't care enough to look at the little thing when I'm squinting with my min view models and my arms stretched out really far. But yeah, that one's a 5 out of 5 change. Very short and simple, but it should be something that's in the game already, so cool. And the other change included, I'd say maybe give more incentive to air blast teammates who are on fire with the Backburner, like say maybe it heals 40 health. Honestly, pretty simple but fun change that I think would benefit the weapon. If I had the pick, I mean, I'd probably choose refunding some ammo for extinguishing a teammate to be a little bit better than healing more health. But if you didn't want to do that, like, sure, being able to get back, like, huge amounts of health instantly just by right-clicking, like, some group of teammates that's the recent victim to the Scorch Shot Pyro on the other team is fine. But yeah, in terms of me being more willing to do it, I think ammo is probably the better one there. So I'll give that one a 4 out of 5. I think it's fun, it's the right direction, but it could be a little bit better in terms of what you suggested. The Dragon's Fury. The faster reload only requires hitting an enemy with the fireball instead of the dead center. 20% smaller hitbox to compensate. Well, Undead Bandit 7306, I got good news for you, brother, because that's already in the game. You don't have to hit dead center to get the faster recharge speed, just the bonus damage, so. Funnily enough, this just turns out to be a 20% hitbox size nerf, which I don't think it needs unless you do a lot of other things to it, so. And then also, repressurization penalty only applies upon missing an air blast, which, like I said, is based. So, overall, I mean, I will give this probably a 2 out of 5, because at least there's something good in there. But I guess Christmas came early for you, or I guess late, considering when I'm recording this, because, yeah, you got your wish. Congratulations. All right, there were some other interesting Dragon's Fury ones, but we'll move on to the Phlogistinator now. Phlog should not require ammo to make it consistent with the other Gordbort weapons, and Air Blast should consume 25% of your oomph meter, and then you don't get Air Blast if you're below 25%. In exchange, you can't be ubercharged or overhealed, and you receive 50% less healing from medics once oomph is active. Ooh, this is a change that I think Fishstick on a Stick actually proposed in his, well, it wasn't a bad weapon academy, so I guess the good weapon academy on the Phlog, where you can, like, consume part of your oomph meter to get an Air Blast, and that way it's, like, fair because you're still using a resource, and therefore the Air Blast is weaker, but you're not just completely screwed without it. And I also don't remember, but I think like some kind of medic penalty was also in his suggested changes, which in this case, I will say you can't be ubercharged or overhealed, and you receive 50% less healing from medics once oomph is active. Reading this to mean that all of this applies while oomph is active, that's probably fine, honestly. Like, you could probably get away with leaving him able to be overhealed, because at that point, it's like, if you can't ubercharge, it's like akin to a Kritzkrieg, which I think that's okay, right? If you just make it just on par with the Kritzkrieg. But yeah, I think some kind of effectiveness nerf when combined with medic pockets is really necessary for the Phlog. It's pretty, it's a little nasty and casual. I would not mind seeing it knocked down a peg. And also, the infinite ammo is an interesting one. So, I mean, I guess for consistency's sake, sure. Because the main concern about putting infinite ammo on a flamethrower is that you could just spam Air Blast, but again, that's consuming like its own separate meter in this case, so yeah, no harm there, I wouldn't imagine. Phlog decreases health and movement speed to emphasize the glass cannon aspect of the weapon. I mean, so this would make it, like, horrible. There aren't really numbers listed here, so I can't judge it that closely, but if you lower Pyro's max health and the movement speed, this would make this definitively the worst flamethrower in the entire game. And there's a large part of me that wants to say based and just move on with my day, because fuck the Phlog. The Phlog? I don't know why I said it like that. I'm a little tired, sorry, I'm recording this late at night. But yeah, in terms of actually fixing the weapon, this is akin to fixing someone's arm by amputating it, because this makes the Phlog unusable, and whether or not that would be a benefit to TF2 is its own discussion, but it's also not, like, a great idea for a redesign, so I'll give this a 2 out of 5. My Phlog rework. My idea is that we drop the no air blast thing and the oomph meter. Instead, it has infinite ammo and an overheat meter, starting out with less damage than stock, but as it heats up, it gets more and more. If you overheat, you take damage and have to wait for it to cool off to use again, so the ideal is to use in bursts. Also, no random crits, and it can't be fully crit boosted, only mini crits, as well as decreased damage to buildings. So, first of all, we should probably get out of the way. If you remove the no air blast thing and the oomph meter, that's all of the stats of the Phlog. So this is basically just reworking it from the ground up from stock as a template, basically. Now, for something like the Phlog, I don't know if I have a problem with that, but that is something to keep in mind. This is effectively completely gutting what it is. So if you aren't someone that cares for this, you might not like that change as much. So let's think. A flamethrower that has infinite ammo and an overheat meter, and you start out dealing less damage than stock, but you get more as you heat it up. So I'm guessing just like continuing to hold M1. And if you hold it for long enough, you take damage, so then you can't even really consistently get the increased damage unless you're being pocketed by a medic, in which case it doesn't matter, or it deals so much self-damage that it's not even worth going for in the first place. And it also can't get random crits and can't be crit boosted and doesn't deal damage to buildings. I mean, this would be a pretty gimmicky weapon at the end of the day. I would find it challenging to balance this well. And I also don't know what it's really doing for Pyro. It's like, again, this definitely feels like a concept for the sake of a concept rather than like trying to fill a hole in Pyro's kit or like do something that would really overhaul or like fundamentally add interesting ways for the class to be played. This is just kind of like a flamethrower, but it has an even more extreme version of the ramp up and fall off that flamethrowers already have. and just has a ton of downsides. So again, I appreciate the idea, as with all of these, but just in this case, I don't really think it's like great for Pyro. So I'll give this a 2 out of 5, simply because, again, this effectively deletes the current Phlog, which is a benefit in and of itself. Phlog, no direct damage, 8 seconds of afterburn for damage only. Gives you direct damage, but no invincible taunting. Wait, so if you're not crit boosted with then you don't deal fire damage at all. You still inflict afterburn, and it's always 8 seconds, but you can't deal like direct damage at all. And then gives you all of your damage back, but you're no longer invincible while taunting. So I don't know what you were cooking here, because I unfortunately have to say, without exaggeration, this is probably the worst rework for the Phlog that I've ever seen, because this literally makes the only situation where it's even usable in the first place the situation where it's already, like, basically broken in, which is where you're spamming the Scorch Shot to fill anyway, and then you taunt and then go on a rampage. It's like, that wouldn't change, but now you have to spam the Scorch Shot. But is, like, technically better because every hit of flames you do inflicts 8 seconds of afterburn. So it would be insane. So I don't think this would solve any problems with the Phlog, and it would make the existing ones worse. And it also just sounds really miserable to use. So I think this one's just not great on all fronts. Again, I say this, and I will accompany it with, I appreciate you for submitting ideas, but this one just isn't quite it. Phlog reworked to be a full heal and ammo refill instead of crits. Interesting. In exchange, give it a pseudo air blast that deletes projectiles instead of reflecting them, and make be the medic shield key. So, okay, it's just special attack, basically. So, interesting. You still build but when you activate it, it gives you a full heal and ammo. And I'm guessing then it, like, still Ubers you for a split second. So it's basically just like a get back into the fight nearly instantly tool. And you still have, like, kind of an air blast, which I guess the best way to, like, intuit that would be that it's the old short circuit alt fire, where it's like an electric field in front of you. But getting a full heal and restoring all of your ammo when you use is honestly interesting. I don't think that would break anything either. I think that's just, like, for Pyro, a tool that would help him flank at least. Like, if you're behind enemy lines, you deal enough fire damage, and now you find a little safe pocket, and now you can get back in the fight faster without having to, like, go out of your way to find packs. Although I think on most maps, you don't really have to, like, go out of your way to find them too much. You just kind of stumble across them. So the electric field isn't completely a nerf, specifically because of Demo Man. Being able to evaporate sticky bombs is way better than being able to, like, slightly push them. Same with, like, loose cannon shots, because it doesn't reset the timer, so just getting rid of the projectile entirely is better than reflecting it and probably still hitting yourself with some splash damage. So yeah, I think this would have niches. Like, it's not the most, like, not even creative. It's not the most, like, game-changing weapon for Pyro, I guess. But in terms of, like, reworks for a weapon, yeah, I'd buy this. I'm on board, actually. You've sold me. I'll give it like a 4.5 out of 5. This is honestly one of the better unique reworks to the Phlog that I've seen. So cool. Thank you. All right, so that's the last of the primaries. Let's move on to secondaries. Fair warning, I should probably say that there were a lot of posts about a lot of specific weapons, so it's going to be a little bit unbalanced here. I only have like 1 or 2 for a couple, which, I mean, obviously makes sense because some are way worse or way more offensive than others, but even then, this is not all of the comments I got or anywhere close, so maybe I can do like a part 2 if there were more interesting ones. But regardless, let's get into them. So this is for the flare gun here. Buff the flare gun's jumping tech to make it more consistent without needing specific walls, so the weapon can be a true midpoint. Not as high damage as the shotgun, not as high mobility as the detonator, but capable of both. So I don't I don't know if the flare gun really needs mobility. In my opinion, the flare gun is the best secondary. It's better than the shotgun by a little bit, and it's better than the Scorch Shot by a little bit. It's pretty close, but the main reason is that I think just being able to instantly do 90 damage from any range whenever you want, that auto reloads where you can have your flamethrower out, is just really good. Like, it's one of the most versatile things in Pyro's kit as it is, minus mobility. And if you give it mobility, you run into the risk of it being a Scorch Shot situation where it just does too many things. Now, that being said, I am in general a fan of Pyro having some kind of like really short range burst mobility, because there are plenty of maps where there's like a ledge that's barely too tall for him to get up, and then you're either running the shotgun and you're screwed, or you're running the flare gun and you have to like try to align it on the wall in such a way where you can hop up the thing, which I occasionally do get use out of. So I can't say that that's like a pointless feature of the weapon, but I wouldn't mind that being like a universal thing that Pyro could do. But buffing the flare gun specifically, I just don't think is the way to do that. So honestly, I'll give this one like a 3 out of 5. Actually, no, I'll give it a 2.5 out of 5, because I don't hate the idea of Pyro having the short mobility again, but I just think the flare gun is like the worst possible thing to give that to, because it's already one of the best secondaries. So I don't know how you'd balance that, but not this way. Okay, this one has 2 included, but we'll just read the second one because the first one's a melee. Buff the mobility of the Detonator. Right now it's okay, I guess, but compared to its older brothers like the rocket launcher, it has pitiful mobility for substantial cost, and while I think that it can be offset with the likes of the back scratcher, health packs, and air strafing, I still just wish it was buffed to allow Pyro to do more with it. So overall, this is something that I agree with. I think the Detonator just doesn't do enough for how much health it takes away from you. Again, I talked about this a little bit in the class-specific one, but overall, I definitely agree that losing 45 health for something that only goes like half the distance of a rocket jump, and you can't chain together to get insane mobility like you can rocket jumps, is criminal. I think either let it go a lot further or don't make it cost a lot of your health. Like, those are the 2 options that I think would honestly be fine either way. So this is a 5 out of 5 balance decision. I'll talk more about this in my balance video, because again, this is one that I've thought about a lot. But yeah, I wish the Detonator did more. I wish it wasn't mediocre. And I will say too, while we're on the topic, because I don't think I actually have any more Detonator ones, for those people that are saying like, oh, well, even though Soldier can do it, that doesn't mean Pyro has to. They're different classes. You should evaluate them on different bases. I think that's a faulty argument, because all of the classes exist in the same game. There are a lot of instances, actually, where it's like, I don't know why I would choose to do something as X class when this other class can do it better. Sniper and Spy being one of the big examples of that. And there are plenty of things that Soldier can do, for instance, in terms of like mobility, close range output, stuff like that, that I think Pyro should get a slice of that pie. I don't think the fact that he's a different class means that he just shouldn't get anything because, oh, well, actually being good at the game is Soldier's job. Pyro's supposed to suck. Like, that's kind of the impression that I get from a lot of those sorts of comments. But anyway, yes, buff the Detonator. It's okay, but it really should be one of the best weapons in his kit considering how skill-based it is. All right, this one's on the Reserve Shooter, bringing back the Reserve Shooter plus Degreaser combo where it mini-crits air-blasted players. So for context, this isn't like Degreaser specific, any flamethrower could do it, it's just that back when this was in the game, all of the weapons that weren't the Degreaser switched even slower. They added the universal switch speed buff in Tough Break, I believe. Or was it Meteor Match? It was one of them, but yeah, this would happen with any flamethrower that has Air Blast and not just the Degreaser. This is one that I genuinely don't know if I've ever made up my mind on, because on one hand, the Reserve Shooter is completely pointless on Pyro as it is. Like, I understand there's clip potential in doing the thing where you, like, air blast a rocket into a soldier's feet, and then you pull out the Reserve Shooter, and then you get mini crits. But guess what? If you do that, the soldier's going to be on really low health already. You're not going to need the mini crits for that at all. I guess it has some utility if the soldier's like bombing you, or if like a soldier or demo really is like bombing you from across the map. But Pyro is already kind of uniquely suited to deal with that because you have Air Blast. You can Air Blast him away. Maybe if I'm really petty and I see a really annoying Trollger, I'll throw this thing on just to ruin his day if he's already ruining mine. But I don't know if that's like a healthy way to balance the game. So I do agree that Pyro needs something. If we're going to let him have the Reserve Shooter, which I think he should have other shotgun options that aren't just like a reskin of the shotgun like the Panic Attack is. But air blasting into mini crits. Ooh, I don't know. I think that it would be a lot more tolerable than it was back then just because of the Jungle Inferno changes to Air Blast, making it where you don't get air blasted up in the same exact 45-degree angle unstrafable arc anymore, so there is at least some variance. But you still can't strafe Air Blast. It is still possible to, like, find angles in a lot of cases where the enemy can't really get away from you getting free mini crits on them. And on one hand, if they're already in, like, effectively air blast range of you, then, like, sure, they probably deserve to take more damage. I don't think it's a problem that, like, the flare gun can do it. And flame range and air blast range are pretty similar for all of the complaints people give about that. But at the same time, it's like, I do agree that it could be frustrating. I don't know. Overall, I think I lean more toward wanting to try bringing this back to, at the very least, test it. So I'll give this a 4 out of 5, but, like, here's the deal. If it turns out to be bad, I also wouldn't hesitate to say, like, we gotta find something else. Like, if it just doesn't work, it just doesn't work, even if I would be willing to maybe give it another try. All right, moving on to the Manmelter. One I've seen people say is that I agree with is for the Manmelter. I've always felt that it's an underappreciated item and slept on. Okay, let's get past the preamble here. Its biggest issue is being reliant on enemy Pyros existing and you babysitting teammates. Letting it not only gain crits by extinguishing teammates, but also being able to remove debuffs would give it more utility and use. Plus, it has more general use, or no, it'd mean that it has more general use that's not reliant on there being a Pyro on the enemy team. I love the Manmelter personally, so anything to give it more of a push it needs to help compete with the other flare guns would be nice. So, this is another one that I'd actually toyed around with a lot, and I've come to realize just wouldn't be enough to, like, really help it compete. It would make it better for sure, but it doesn't really solve the core issue that in order to use this thing, like, effectively at all, you're reliant on circumstances that are out of your control. Just in this case, you're making there be more circumstances by really not that wide of a margin either. Like, I know it probably feels like you're getting Girardied or milked or bled pretty often, but really think about how much do you encounter those debuffs in TF2. The only way you can bleed is from projectiles, which are on a pretty long cooldown and can only hit one enemy each, and the only renewable sources of bleed are on melee weapons that no one actually uses. The Tribalman Shiv and Southern Hospitality, and to a lesser extent of not being used, the Boston Basher. I occasionally see that, but it's still pretty rare it's being used for combat. So this is maybe giving you like 2 or 3 crits over the course of the entire match if a scout's running the Flying Guillotine and is like cracked with it. And Mad Milk and Girardi are also pretty uncommon. Again, I feel like I'm only watching my teammates get splashed with those like maybe a couple times per match. Usually if a scout or sniper is using their jar, it's in personal self-defense to win a 1v1, which you're probably not going to be able to help with too much. Now that said, I don't mind the idea of there being more things that counter Mad Milk and Girardi because they're very powerful weapons that really don't have too much counterplay as it is. The problem is that the Manmelter would be a weapon that you would have to run specifically to go out of your way to counter these weapons. You couldn't just have it incidentally, and then when you saw the opportunity arise, well, you have the tool for the job. And I don't think maybe your team getting milked or Girardied every once in a while is a compelling enough use case on top of what already exists to encourage people to actually go out of their way to run the Manmelter. So this is another one that I'll talk about in my rebalance video whenever I get to it. This is a good stat to put on the Manmelter, but it just doesn't fix the core issue that it's way too situational, and the situations that are required aren't even in your control. They still rely, even with removing debuffs, on opponents running specific weapons and classes. The Manmelter could absorb projectiles for 2 stored crits. Oh my god, please. Okay, please don't do this. This would be horrid, and let me explain why here. Every single thing in TF2 that lets you either reflect or destroy projectiles is on a pretty limited meter. You have the short circuit, which doesn't really require any timing, but you only get 3 of them. And then you have Air Blast, which you do get 10 of if you're using stock, but you have to time it pretty precisely to actually reflect. The Manmelter, however, has no penalty for just holding M2 forever, meaning that you could stand in front of your team's sentry gun or heavy or medic or whatever, hold M2 and suck in every projectile that would ever get flung your way for free, and then be rewarded with crits. that would be insane. This would be probably one of the most campy defensive weapons in the entire game. It's just like a super short circuit in that case. People already don't like when people delete their projectiles or reflect them, so the fact that the other person wouldn't even have to have any semblance of timing it or resource management, I think would just be way more frustrating than anything. So I have to give this a 1 out of 5. I'm sorry. I can't agree with this. This would be an eldritch abomination we would put in TF2. The Manmelter is able to suck in stickies. Every 4 stickies grants 1 crit. I feel like giving the Manmelter a reflect or something that affects all projectiles makes it too much of a replacement for Air Blast when paired with the Phlog. Wow, very ironically good bit of foresight there. But most sticky traps are hard to deal with in the first place with Air Blast, so why not give Pyro a way to deal with sticky traps in a better way? Honestly, I don't disagree. Okay, well, I kind of do in the sense that sticky traps aren't hard to deal with as Pyro. You shoot the Scorch Shot or Detonator at them, and then they're gone. But if you wanted to make those a little bit less effective, then sure. I actually don't mind the Manmelter as one of them that can counter sticky traps. And actually, this would have way better utility because sticky spam is something that no class really has an answer to if the demo man's good at it. And Pyro, in my opinion, should. I think Air Blast realistically should be what you're doing. But the demo man can just detonate right after you Air Blast and still potentially damage you. So having an option to say, no, I am running a tool specifically to not get sticky spammed, I wouldn't be opposed to Pyro having something like that in his arsenal. And then if you suck in 4 stickies, you get 1 crit. That's a little stingy. Honestly, even 2 stickies per crit would be fine, because a lot of the time, demo's not having all 8 of them down. You're not getting full 2 crits out of it ever. But yeah, I kind of like this. Again, it doesn't really fix the weapon. It's still this still leaves it in the it's situational and you don't control the situation category. But yeah, I'll give this like a 3.5 out of 5. I think it works for all intents and purposes, fulfills a pretty solid role, and again, I could like kind of buy the weapon doing this, I guess. The Manmelter. Give it a mechanic where getting a kill with it gives you 1 stored crit. Crit kills included. Hell yes. If we're talking ways to put the Manmelter on par with the other flare guns, this would probably be about it. Being able to chain crit kills together would be so much fun. It would be maybe a little bit annoying to deal with. I wouldn't like the fact that, like, oh, my dumbass scout ran in with like 10 health and died to a crit, and now I get crit too because of that. But at the same time, like, if that situation happens, you have plenty of time to see that the scout died to a crit and then prepare to dodge the incoming projectile knowing that he's about to shoot it. It's not like it's going to be instantaneous. So, and also it justifies the non-crit boosted flares being weaker because you can continuously hit people with them, and if you do get a kill, you're rewarded with a very powerful shot. I'll give this a... do I give it a 5 out of 5? Maybe 4.5. I think there probably are like slightly better, more thematic solutions, but this is a really good one. I would not complain if they put this into the game. It would be a lot of fun to mess around with. All right, for the Thermal Thruster. Give the Thermal Thruster its MVM upgrade ability to launch a second time while in midair. So I do agree that the Thermal Thruster is lacking in a lot of ways, even if it's honestly not as bad as people assume or anywhere close. But I don't know what this would do for it at all. Like, the issue with it isn't that it doesn't go far enough per jump. It's more that it's just kind of unreliable because it's very slow in a lot of ways. It has the deploy speed penalty, which I don't know if it should have. It has the holster speed penalty, which I really don't think it should have. And it takes a while to recharge without really any way to speed it up, which okay, you would have to be careful with speeding this up a ton, but I do think there should be ways to encourage you to play more aggressively. However, it goes plenty far per jump. Like, that's not really the issue. And in fact, I would even say this would make it even worse because this would let you fly really far across the map. Like, this would give you sticky jumper levels of mobility without really any downside to that. Well, I guess the downside, like the sticky jumper, is you sacrifice your secondary, but I just don't know this would help the weapon. It would seem like it would cause way more problems than it would actually solve, even if it might be kind of fun in like very specific circumstances. So I think it's best we leave this one for MVM. I'll rate this one at like a 2 out of 5. You can do horizontal jumps with the Thermal Thruster. Okay, that's an interesting suggestion. Check this out though. What do you mean by that exactly? Normally I like to evaluate something based on like the next best way to interpret it, but I don't know what this could refer to. like to where the initial little burst of stuff goes horizontal, because that doesn't really like affect anything. That's barely giving you any more distance, and in fact, if you could do that, I feel like that would be a problem, because you're more likely to like hit the ground before you do it, or before you like get off it. Yeah, I don't know. This is a weird one. An idea I've never seen before for Pyro is making the thermal thruster part of his default kit as the 3rd slot, which I'm guessing you mean the 4th. Oh no, while moving the melee to a 4th slot, so this would be number 3, okay. Pyro, it's a mixed stat at where ride the line between wanting to be a... Pyro is in a mixed state where he wants to ride the line between wanting to be a jack of all trades but not being able to be as versatile as other mercs like Soldier or Demo. And while this wouldn't fix the problem completely, giving it more mobility without needing to use specific items like the Powerjack and Detonator without losing all range damage will push his viability more in the generalist direction rather than being a defensive support that it is now. So, this is one that I think I talked about in one of my videos. In the one where I talked about like all the classes having a different slot for all of their weapon types, I mentioned Pyro having an extra thermal thruster slot might be cool, and I've had it in my head since then that this would be like a really interesting thing to test, even though I don't actually remember how much in depth I went into that in the video itself. But this isn't something I think you could do with the thermal thruster as it is, because I genuinely do think the thermal thruster is like actually pretty good as an entirely separate secondary as it is. So you would probably have to implement some kind of nerfs to make it like either go less far or make it, I don't know, maybe more committal. How would you have to deal with that? Maybe you'd make it cost flamethrower ammo to use, but then I guess at that point, why not just make air blast jumping? Regardless though, this is one that I think a lot of people would see and immediately like thumbs down, but I'm a little bit more optimistic on this being a potential upgrade to Pyro that could work. Again, you'd have to do a lot with it to, or with the thermal thruster anyway, to make sure that it's not basically just a second free secondary, but I really wouldn't be opposed to this being a way to solve his mobility. The thermal thruster is one of the better choices we have for it. Again, just maybe adding some kind of drawback to using it like Soldier and Demo have when they use their mobility. I don't know, it could work. So maybe I'll give this like a 2.5 out of 5, like cautiously optimistic, right? But yeah, honestly, one of the more out there changes that I would vouch for. Or sorry, vouch for trying. There's a very fine line between those things. Okay, we are now on to the last 2 secondaries, which both have more entries than normal because they're both kind of problem weapons in their own way. First of all, the Scorch Shot. This one, I think most people know what's wrong with it, but I'm curious to see what rebalance ideas they've suggested. So, Scorch Shot deals reduced afterburn, shots don't stun, and they bounce kind of like stock grenades. Wait, so they bounce like stock grenades. So what does that mean exactly? Like if you shoot a Scorch Shot flare at the floor, it tumbles around and then explodes after a little bit? Because if that's the case, that would be insane. I don't know if I quite agree with that being how that should work. Because one of the bigger problems with the Scorch Shot that I think most people find frustrating is that it's really easy to just constantly be on fire, and having to constantly worry about just random flare rollers on the floor that can hit you around corners now if you like bounce them off of walls and stuff. That said, I think the first 2 changes, ignoring the grenade bouncing one for now, are pretty solid. I mean, dealing reduced afterburn and not stunning, like, probably would make it a pretty bad weapon. Ideally, you'd do something different with it entirely, but I do think this would, at the very least, make it a little bit more tolerable to play against, because those 2 things just are, I guess, the biggest issues people take with it. So I'll give this one a 3 out of 5, because I do think, like, stock grenade bouncing is an interesting concept. I just don't know how that would feel to play against in practice, because I could definitely see Pyro's, like, ricocheting flares around corners, and now it's like even more of a problem where you're on fire and can't even see the Pyro who's igniting you, and I would really have to see that one tested before committing, but the first two changes at the very least do help. Change the knockback stat on the Scorch Shot to flare can ricochet once and explodes when target is hit or collides with another surface. So in my opinion, if you just wanted to make an interesting weapon, this is a much better way to do it, although again, I'm still not 100% sold on the idea of Pyros just being able to like spam around diagonal corners and ignite whole groups of people he can't even see. And also, I'm honestly not sure the knockback is the actual problem that a lot of people have with the Scorch Shot. It's more the fact that when you do get knocked back, it locks your velocity temporarily, similar to how an air blast does it, so you can't really strafe. Your options of movement are limited, which is just an inherently annoying thing to play against, not having agency to do anything. But I don't think knockback in and of itself is as frustrating as a mechanic, and in fact, on the Scorch Shot, I'd even argue that it's one of the very few things that's like actually keeping this weapon interesting. It's not just a spam weapon, because if you use it with the Axtinguisher, you can make it not just a spam weapon by starting the fight with a Scorch Shot flare, knocking the opponent in the direction you want, and lighting them on fire for like pretty high afterburn combo damage with the Axtinguisher. That sets them up better to follow up with a melee hit, and then you go in for the kill. And in my opinion, that's like one of the few respectable ways to use it, and you would effectively be taking that away if you remove the knockback entirely. So actually, I think if instead of removing the knockback, you removed the explosion, the design with a ricocheting shot could actually work. It wouldn't be nearly as annoying if you had to be directly hit by it instead of like maybe it landing near you or your teammate beside you getting hit in order to be lit on fire. I think that actually probably would be a pretty cool design for it, but considering that's not what you put, I'll probably give this one a 3 out of 5 too. I'm not, again, the biggest fan of the spammy aspects of it still being a thing, but in this case even more powerful. Like even if you removed the knockback, you would still just constantly be on fire, and I think that's one of the bigger problems that should be fixed with it first and foremost. Oh boy, this one's a paragraph. Make the Scorch Shot the Pyro's loose cannon. Many rebalances that I see remove the Scorch Shot's knockback and mini crit bounce, which is fine, but I see people who use the Scorch Shot to do stuff like Axtinguisher and Dragon's Fury combos, so I don't want to see it completely removed. Which, yes, is exactly what I was saying earlier, and I really don't mind the idea of Pyro, who's already a class that has easy knockback, having it on a secondary weapon if it doesn't stun. Plus, it would just turn into a crutch for people who don't know how to use the Detonator, which, I mean, is also kind of true. Instead, have it have a massive range penalty where it travels in an arc, have it not explode when hitting surfaces and players, and make it only explode by a fuse time in which you can charge to decrease it. You cannot spam this from afar anymore to get easy damage, and the stupid mini crit bounce thing has to be done manually like the loose cannon by making sure you time your charge just right to do it. So in order to get the old damage that one-shots light classes, you have to have actual skill, and you need to hit it directly instead of just at people's feet, so it takes even more skill. By doing this, you keep the Scorch Shot's insane combo potential, tech, and even stun, but this time it takes actual skill and practice and completely removes spamming it across the choke point. Only the Detonator should be able to do that, so it stops being in the Scorch Shot shadow. I know you hate the loose cannon, but for 90% of TF2 fans, this would be a legitimately fun side grade to flare guns. The ammo can be reduced to a small amount if you were really worried that people would still spam it behind the corner, so there is even less incentive to spam this randomly. So I think to jump the gun a little bit, my analysis on this probably would rely a lot on what we're tuning the damage to be, because a lot of my frustration with the loose cannon is that, number one, you just instantly die a lot of the time if a demo man hits you with a double donk, and if you don't, you're flung so far out of position and probably take enough fall damage that it's just way too punishing to get hit by when it's out of your control a lot of the time as to whether the demo man hits the double donk. You can try to avoid it if you want, but like, it's still a pretty fast projectile at the end of the day. The other problem that I have with the loose cannon, though, that wouldn't be a problem here, is that it has 4 shots that all do knockback. So if the demo man using it really wants to, he can just spam click, and then you're just going to constantly be flung around the bunch, which normally doesn't matter. It is technically worse than double donking, but it's still annoying to play against, and also just way too powerful for denying Ubers, in my opinion. Like, Pyro at least has to get up close in, like, a revved heavy's face, but the demo man can corner peek and do it, which I don't agree with that being a thing. But I really actually don't hate this design for the Scorch Shot, but a lot of my, again, more specific analysis would be based on how much damage we're making it deal, because if it's too little, then why not just use the stock flare gun? Or, not really stock, I guess, but you know what I mean. Because that does 90 damage up close if you've already lit the enemy on fire, and if you already have to be up close to get the, like, weird double donk thing, then why would you bother doing that when you could just use your flamethrower and hit a flare, and that's, like, way easier. But if the entire combo is doing more than 90 damage, that sounds insane, because that also comes with Afterburn, probably. So that's very easily going to one-shot a light class from basically, well, not anywhere. I guess it's still, like, kind of limited, but the Scorch Shot flares are a bit faster than cannonballs, so the range that you could hit that would be farther than the loose cannon, which, again, I don't know if, like, one-shotting light classes from that distance should be a thing. So I will give this one a 3.5 out of 5. I do appreciate the idea. Honestly, it's one of the more interesting ones that I've seen for rebalancing the Scorch Shot that still, like, fits the current theme pretty nicely. But you would have to be very careful in how you tune the numbers as to not make it, like, very frustrating to fight against. That said, though, if you could still overload jump with it, I'm imagining a clip where a Pyro goes flying by overload jumping, doing, like, a flare double donk on his way down, and hitting an Axtinguisher by knocking the opponent up and, like, market guarding him, basically, which would be probably the most insane thing I've ever seen in TF2, and for that reason, like, yeah, I am on board with this more than I suspected, actually. I feel like giving the Scorch Shot a fall-off effect would do numbers and encourage a Pyro to use it for mid-combo instead of just spamming from long range. It would also give each of the flare guns a unique purpose when playing combo Pyro. Detonator helps you start a combo, flare ends a combo, and the Scorch Shot could be some kind of mid-combo option. So as much as I've talked up the Scorch Shot's ability to combo with the Axtinguisher, I want to be clear that that shouldn't be the entire thing you're relying on when rebalancing it, because at the end of the day, that is still, like, a very specific function that it has. In fact, I've described it as, like, the saving grace, the only thing that makes the current Scorch Shot, like, actually interesting, not what I think the entire purpose of it should be. Because imagine you're using it with anything that's not the Axtinguisher, and then what do you do with it? Like, maybe you could go for a higher damage hit with the back scratcher, I guess, but even though there's, like, no incentive to do that because you could just WM1 them instead and then not have to hit the Scorch Shot mid-combo. Or the other counterpoint that I'll give based on how you describe the flare guns is, why would I want to extend my combo when I could just end it with the normal flare gun? Because at the health thresholds that I'm going to be wanting to extend the combo with the Scorch Shot, that person's probably going to be basically dead with the normal flare gun. So I don't know why I wouldn't just want the extra damage outright, rather than, like, the potential to set up something cool, I guess. Like, I don't know. It's a very clip-heavy way to play, and I don't know if that's what we should be balancing certain weapons around, especially if those weapons aren't even useful on their own. It's not like the Scorch Shot is doing the clip farming here. The biggest problem that I have with what you suggested, though, is the damage fall-off. I don't think the Scorch Shot should, or really any flare gun, should have that, just because that's the one thing the flare guns have over the shotguns, is they deal damage at a much higher range. If the Scorch Shot's effective range was similar to the shotguns, why wouldn't I just use the shotgun and get 90 damage when the Scorch Shot is hitting, like, maybe 42 on a mini crit? Like, it's just not a good deal, and you do have to consider what else you could be using instead when suggesting this. So I see where you're going with this one. I just don't agree that it's a good solution to the Scorch Shot specifically. I'll give it, like, a 2 out of 5. Instead of igniting people, the Scorch Shot gasses people like the gas passer. Functionally, this makes it 2 hits to light people on fire on its own, but this could lead to some interesting combos. Okay, so consider you're a Pyro who lived in the universe where this was in the game, and you have 2 options for a flare gun. One of them instantly lights enemies on fire with the first hit, and on the second hit, it does a critical hit for 90 damage from anywhere. The second one inflicts enemies with a debuff on hit that may cause them to be light on fire if they get hit again, but maybe not, who really knows. And if you hit a follow-up shot, then they do the same exact thing that the first option did on the first shot. Why would you want to use this ever? I guess if it still had the explosion, then you could, like, cover groups of enemies in gas, but then it's just a worse detonator because, like, let's say I tag a retreating enemy with the detonator, well, then they're probably going to burn out and die if they're at low health. But with this, they would just be covered in gas, and then they can get away for free with no penalties, so... I'm not, like... I'm not sure what this would do. I'm going to be completely honest. This just doesn't need to be in the game. You would have to overhaul what the gas debuff itself actually does significantly for this to even be, like, potentially an okay idea. So sadly, I will have to give this a Probably a 2 out of 5, because it would make the Scorch Shot less annoying to play against and not completely gutted, I guess, but it's also just not very well thought out. I have a horrendous redesign for the Scorch Shot. So basically, we remove its ability to explode, we take away its ability to do mini crits to burning players, make it not apply afterburn, it only does 1 damage, and it can't random crit. Oh no, is this a fucking grouch one? In return, it has a 25% projectile speed increase, and 50% of afterburn damage dealt by the wearer is added to the next flare. Okay, so basically this is a 1 damage projectile that does nothing on hit, but it adds 50% of the, I guess, total afterburn damage you've dealt since the last flare, maybe? Or is it like total that life? Because if it's that life, this is like busted as hell. Actually, even if the damage refreshes for each shot, this might be busted as hell. Because imagine like walking into a group of enemies, just burning everyone to a crisp and dealing like hundreds of afterburn damage, which really is not that hard of a thing to do. If you light 3 enemies on fire, that's like 24 afterburn damage per second that you're racking up. So if they're on fire for 4 seconds, which they're gonna be, you now have a 100 damage projectile chambered, which would be a little bit insane. But now, let's say that you just wanted to save it, because I'm guessing there would be no cap. So you just like, you've racked up like 400 afterburn damage, and then you just one-shot an overhealed heavy. That would be really funny, actually. Although, to be fair, there would be a lot of build-up for you to be able to do that. And 100 damage projectile isn't that much more than like a crit flare, and it doesn't have afterburn, so I guess it would be balanced. It would just be like pretty annoying to use, because if you aren't actively doing that, like let's say you're in a position where you just need to spam flares, which like is a pretty common position as Pyro, you have 1 damage, like little fucking peas that you're spraying at the enemy. So I do like the idea, in all honesty, but I do think this would be a little bit annoying to both use and potentially to play against. Because again, like let's say you are that overhealed heavy and you just instantly die because a Pyro ran at you and you have no way of knowing how much afterburn damage he's dealt since the last shot. And then again, if you're the Pyro, like you're gonna be left without a secondary a lot of the time. You actually have to like go in with your primary and deal damage, which I guess this is the same problem as the gas passer, I'm realizing, but you have to deal damage with your primary for your secondary to even be kind of usable. So it's interesting. It's a start, but I would want to see this one probably made a little bit better in the worst case scenarios, and maybe not quite as insane in the absolute best case scenarios. So I'll give this a 3 out of 5, actually. I think this is a pretty cool idea, just not quite there yet. And I think there were a couple more Scorch Shot ones, but let's move on for now, because we have the best weapon in the entirety of TF2 to cover, the Gas Passer. Oh boy. Buff the Gas Passer to also double the damage from fire. So I'm guessing this means like any fire damage you deal is doubled, or maybe it just means the afterburn, because one of those is like way more powerful than the other ones. Honestly, either way, I'm not sure I'm a fan of like how the numbers work out here. If this does just mean like doubling afterburn damage for anyone that gets ignited, that ends up being what? That's 8 seconds of afterburn, which is 64 damage, I believe. Yeah, ish. And then multiplied by 2, so that's 128 total damage of afterburn over 8 seconds, which is enough to kill a light class. I mean, this wouldn't do nothing anymore, but that still, I don't know, just doesn't make me think happy thoughts. Like I mentioned when someone suggested, what was it, all of the crit flames doing crit afterburn. I don't think afterburn itself should be a tool that you are like absolutely banking on to kill the opponent. I think it should be more of a pressure tool that can kill if they're not careful, but itself shouldn't be like such an imposing form of damage that you have no ability to like do anything about it other than immediately extinguish yourself or die. And even though this itself wouldn't do any initial damage, so it would be a bit more tolerable, it's not like you're taking a flare crit and then crit afterburn, I still just think that's a little bit too overbearing. I don't think that if you're at full health, you should have to worry about dying from damage over time. That just isn't the sort of thing that should be encouraged in TF2. Mainly because you can't really miss with DOT, right? Like, it's applied and it's applied. If you're the applicator, you don't have to like do anything skill-based to continuously get a reward for hitting one single thing. And in this case, yeah, the thing you have to hit is like this massive fart cloud that kind of goes everywhere and has a pretty reasonable range. So I don't like that. And then double flame damage outright is absurd. That's like effectively a free Phlog with any flamethrower that also stacks with Phlog, which is like horrifying to think about. Like, if you activate and then throw gas at someone, you deal 6 times the normal flame damage, which is a little scary. That's like a full health heavy is maybe lasting a half second and 6x damage. That's I don't know if I like that at all. But anyway, I'll give this one in its totality like probably a 2 out of 5 either way. Like, again, it makes the gas passer do something, but this tips the scales like really far in the other direction. And even like, honestly, like, the more I think about it, even just the afterburn damage bonus doesn't really do that much. It's just annoying more than anything. So either way, yeah, I'm just not the biggest fan of this one. The gas passer now functions more as a Molotov. When thrown, a direct hit will do 40 damage plus an explosion radius similar to that of the rocket launcher that sets people on fire, and then leaves fire on the ground that sets enemies on fire when they walk on it. This makes it a lot more effective area denial tool while also making it so you aren't completely skipping out on a damaging secondary anymore. So this is one of those suggestions that I've seen thrown around a lot in the community. I'm not trying to knock the person who suggested it here, but I mean, it is, in all honesty, one that's pretty common, or is pretty common, you might even say. But the idea that you can throw the gas passer and then it creates effectively a CSGO Molotov on the ground where enemies that walk into like a fire pool get damaged is, I mean, honestly a pretty sensible thing to expect from a can of gas that you're lighting on fire. The thing about this one, though, is that I'm not sure how I feel about permanent area denial with, again, very minimal player input in TF2. Right now, the only things that are like truly area denial, where it's like if you go into some kind of radius, you immediately start taking damage, are sentry guns, and those take a while and are very committal to set up. And also, like, you can destroy a sentry gun. If you don't want it shooting you, then just break it, idiot. I don't know why you never thought of that. This obviously would defend a lot smaller of an area, but there isn't really any way to get rid of it. I guess maybe you could add some mechanic where if a Pyro air blasts the Molotov, then it's gone, but then it kind of makes it pretty useless, right? Like, how many teams are you going up against without a Pyro? But the main concern that I have is that TF2 doesn't have any just, like, set and forget area denial. Like, if you want to take control over a large space, you have to actively be maintaining the thing that's doing that, whether that's, again, like repairing and upgrading a sentry gun, even for like sticky traps, which are kind of area denial. They're like, I don't know, speculative area denial maybe. You have to at least be watching the stickies. Like, you can't just put them there and then they'll explode when an enemy walks over them and you get free defense on some particular point. So I think Pyro having something that just requires you to like look where you want to defend and then throw it, and now let's say like you throw it onto a payload cart or whatever, all of the enemies either have enough health to tank it and are constantly being damaged, or they have to leave, and you don't even have to do anything once you've thrown it. Like, that's just, I don't know. It's not interactive enough for TF2's brand of doing that, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Now, one thing that I do think would be interesting is, let's say the gas cloud was only on fire for as long as you were like manually pumping flamethrower flames into it, and as long as you just held M1 on the cloud, it just dealt constant damage to anything in the cloud. That might be interesting, because that's at least, again, requiring you to, like, expend ammo and physically be there to do it. But yeah, just a Molotov. Again, this is an idea that I've seen a ton. I don't agree with this being, like, beneficial to TF2. So I'll rate this one as a 2.5 out of 5, because I don't think it's, like, as bad as some of the flat 2s that I've seen. Like, it would be better than what we have now. Like, I'll be completely honest. I don't foresee a world where that's so annoying that it ruins the entire game, but there are definitely better and more fun to use and fun to play against designs that you could have for this, so I'm not sold on it. I think a really simple buff for the gas passer could be 1, making the hit that ignites the opponent mini crit, and 2, start with full charge. I think this is subtle enough that it wouldn't upend the current weapon while also buffing it slightly. Maybe increase the mini crit to a crit since it's only 1, but I feel like that would be awful with any rocket or pill. So I mean, yeah, I do agree that a full guaranteed crit on any enemy that is soaked in gas is a little much. Mainly because, again, it's not that hard to apply gas. Like, strictly speaking, if you think of the gas cloud like a splash radius, this is one of the most generous weapons to hit in the entire game. This is like 3x the splash radius of like a sticky bomb or something. So you have to keep that in mind, like considering it's very, very easy to apply gas when determining what it does. How punished should enemies be for actively like going into it? As far as the main changes though, I honestly don't hate these. The idea where if you're covered in gas, you know the next hit you're going to take that ignites you will be like a mini crit is a lot more than what it currently is. That might be enough to where people that are covered in gas actually feel the need to back off and not risk going into combat. It's not the most exciting design in terms of counterplay, but I do think if you wanted to really like hammer this home as area denial, something that doesn't just outright damage you, but more of like now imposes a new risk onto you where you can continue to like march forward or whatever, but you're obviously going to like run the risk of dying a lot quicker if you do. That's one of the better ways and more fair ways, anyway, that I could think of balancing the gas passer. So, in terms of making gassed enemies take mini crits, honestly, sure. I think that would fit in with the weapon nicely and is probably one of the more subtle but well-balancing stats that I've seen. Starting with full charge is a little bit harder to weigh in on, though, because I don't want to run into the same problem that you have with Girardi, which is that like a lot of maps, especially ones with like a dedicated attacker and defender role, have resupply cabinets that aren't very far away from the final point. And if you are allowed to resupply jars, you can basically just chuck it onto the point, go back and get a new one, and now you have like a permanent debuff on the objective. And with the gas passer, this would be infinitely worse because the cloud lingers. It's not just like one explosion and then you have to go get a new one. It's like that cloud is going to sit there and continuously inflict the debuff, and by the time it's gone, you're already back from spawn with a brand new one to reapply it again. So that does just make a permanent no-go zone anywhere you want that's near the last point, which is not what we should be encouraging in TF2. But maybe if you made it start at like half charge, that would be fine. So that way it's like you at least have some kind of advantage coming out of spawn, and the resupply doesn't do nothing, but you do have to work for the extra little bit just to make it not horribly spammable. So I will give this one a 3.5 out of 5. I think this is a relatively good change. Again, not quite a 4. I don't want to do all of them as 0.5s, but it's like, it's better than a 3. It's like I can say more confidently this would work, but I don't think it's like quite a 4. It's not to the point where I would just slap this in-game outright because of the spammability issues. Overall, good direction to take it though, I wouldn't mind that. The gas passer gains a taunt effect that makes him drink the gas, which gives him a 50% movement speed buff for 10 seconds. And when the buff ends, Pyro dies from ingesting a whole can of oil. I mean, we gotta make the Pyro die at the end of it. We don't want kids to think that it's okay to drink gas cans to get a movement speed buff in real life or whatever. So obviously this is a little bit more of a meme suggestion. I hope, because if not, that means that someone seriously thought 10 seconds of living with a speed boost is worth 20 seconds of respawning, and I don't know about that one. But I do think it's funny. Some kind of like taunt effect with the gas passer might be cute. I don't know. Gas passer. You can ignite the gas cloud for some extra 5 seconds of burning, plus the gas cloud duration itself up to 10 seconds technically by yourself. Wait, what does this mean? You can ignite the gas cloud for some extra 5 seconds of burning? So like it's on fire for 5 more seconds plus the gas cloud duration. So it's up to 10 seconds of like being on fire. Sorry, I'm very confused of what the wording of this one is. Now mix this with the Explode on Ignite upgrade. It's just a massive fire cloud, not a nuclear explosion. Well, thank you for clarifying that. I might have been confused. Okay, I'm gonna be brutally honest. I might have just put this in here because the wording is obtuse enough that I didn't realize it was like the same suggestion as the other one, where you just ignite it and it does burning damage. You can ignite the cloud for 5 seconds of extra burning, plus the gas cloud duration itself by yourself? So, I don't know. This is somewhere between a 1 and a 5, probably. I don't know what this means. Gas Passer gives a permanent fire afterburn with twice the damage. Oh god. Meds will only stop the fire and not give any health. Will spread if went in contact. Nerf, this would douse your team and you if you all were in the radius. It would also not use the damage from the Gas Passer itself for its charge up. Yes, this is a serious idea. Okay, so, considering this is a serious idea, I won't treat this as a meme and be mean. Consider the following though. Let's say that I have little gooberish intentions and I feel like being a little devil, and I join a TF2 match and I say, you know what would be really funny? I'm gonna throw this cloud at my own team as they spawn. And now my entire team is covered in gas and burning and dying. And I don't know if that should be a status. the griefing potential this would have if you could douse your team and make them all have a permanent afterburn that does double damage would be absurd. I don't know about that one. Like that would be honestly really funny until it happened to me, and then I wouldn't like it anymore. That's my like genuine, that's my serious commentary on it. I would think it's really funny until it happened to me. Even ignoring that though, permanent afterburn with double damage is like, again, go back to the thing that I mentioned earlier of like dealing with like constant damage that will kill you at all is just not something that you should be dealing with in TF2. Damage over time is already a little bit annoying to get hit with, so making it genuinely lethal and forcing you to like reroute your entire game around something that whatever class that applied it can just reapply again in the future is not what I would like to see. And also will spread if wind and contact. So yeah, holy griefing potential. Imagine like, okay, here's what I'd do to grief. I'd go bonk scout. I'd bonk, walk into the fire to like get lit on fire without taking damage, and then run into my team to light everyone on fire. It's permanent afterburn too, so they just burn until they're dead. This would be the biggest griefer weapon I think the game will have ever experienced if this got in. This is absurd. Like, I hope I've done a good enough job of explaining why these mechanics aren't something that we should probably ask for in TF2. In fact, it should be something we're actively petitioning against. Like, please don't add permanent afterburn ever. Or the ability for, like, me to, like, fuck over my teammates. Or vice versa, rather. Maybe if I could do it and no one else could, then it would be funny. Anyway, I'm gonna give this a 5 out of 5 for the funny factor, but, like, a 1 out of 5 for the actual suggestion, because I don't like it. All right, Gas Passer. Hold up to 3 cans, and once thrown after 7 seconds, it explodes into a fiery fireball. Okay, well, I'm glad we clarified what kind of fireball it was. That will kill light classes instantly. And then the downsides are loud-ass beeping noise? What? Wait, what? It's a gas can. What the fuck do you mean beeping noise? And then the clarify noise, the who, it's what it is. What? I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be mean. This is I can't solve the riddle. Noise, the who, it's what it's. Well, I didn't know I would be taking weapon suggestions for Dr. Seuss here. And then self-damage apply. Self-damage applies, so I'm guessing you get damaged by it too. And then no more extinguishing friendly players, in parentheses, M2 flamethrower. Wait, so does that mean that your air blast can't extinguish friendly players if you have this, or are you just like comparing extinguishing to like what it does on the flamethrower? Sorry, I'm enamored by the stat where the gas can, the cloud of gas makes a beeping noise. Like, what fucking nanobots are we programming into TF2 here? What does this mean? Okay, so to take it seriously, once thrown after 7 seconds, explodes into a fireball that kills light classes instantly. I mean, I guess if it's 7 seconds, you know, you have time to evade it. So in reality, I don't think this would do anything, except this also does kind of have the same like speculative area denial thing as I mentioned with Demo Man sticky trapping, where you throw this onto a payload cart, and if someone sees it and didn't see you throw it, they can't step into it until it's gone because they don't know when it's going to explode. And also, you get 3 gas cans with this, so you could just nuke the entire continent. You could actually just, like, firebomb the entirety of Upward if you wanted to. Throw one of these at each spawn that enemies can come out of, and now you've just created, like, a tactical nuke. So, yeah, I'm gonna give it a 2 out of 5 because the idea of throwing a gas can and then it starts beeping for no reason is really funny. Like, I have not gotten over that. That's a really funny mental image. I'm gonna be honest, I don't know why I picked any of these. These were meant to be serious discussions. Like, I must have been really tired when I selected these. Okay, this one looks like a serious one. Increase the particles effect and reduce the timer on the gas passer to make it like a CSGO smoke grenade. Ooh, so this is another one that I have seen floating around. It's a lot less common of a suggestion than the Molotov, but due to this being the only source of like lingering particles in the entire game, I think people do naturally compare this to a smoke grenade and wonder what it would be like if TF2 like actually had a smoke grenade. And my answer to that is probably not amazing. Like, you would have to make it so your team can kind of see through it, is my thought. And even then, I'm just not keen on mechanics that reduce visual information to that degree. Maybe in attack shooter you can get away with it. In CSGO, like, it's not a problem, right? But in TF2, when the game is a lot more chaotic and your own mobility is what's causing you to survive crazy encounters a lot of the time, just having some kind of smoke screen you can spam through, I don't know. I can't see this being good for the game, to be honest. I think most mechanics that reduce player agency are things that, in general, people just don't like dealing with, and this would certainly fall into that. But if you made this like a really brief smoke screen, like I don't know how long CSGOs are, so you reduce the timer on the gas passer. Oh no, sorry, you're saying reduce the cooldown. Okay, well maybe that doesn't really change it, but like maybe if you had the smoke screen linger for less time and it was just like a puff of smoke to distract people, then maybe. But something that lingers for a long time, or even as long as the gas passer currently does, is just like, I don't know. I can't see that being fun to play against. So for that, I just don't support it. That said, I will still give it a 3 out of 5, because I think like there are ways to make it not horribly annoying to play against, but it's also just like, it's not something the game needs. It's like, it's a cool idea, but I can't see this increasing the fun that anyone's having in TF2, and I think that's something that's important to consider when doing rebalances. I think making it so that air blasting someone coats them in gas while you have the gas passer equipped could be interesting. You could set up combos with the Neon or the Axtinguisher by air blasting them up for fall damage, and your teammates could follow up on air blasting someone far away by igniting them. Ooh, honestly? I don't think I've ever seen this before, but that's a pretty cool idea. I think, okay, the one caveat that I would have to... Well, no, I was going to say, like, maybe make it on a timer, but I guess if you're already in air blast range, you're also in flame range, so there's nothing strictly wrong with that. And you are pushing them away from you, or you're pushing them into a wall, so either way, it's like they're going to be in a better or worse position, and that's not changing by coating them in gas. But it does let you tack on extra damage. Here's the deal. I don't think this would, like, completely solve the weapon's problems, right? Like, the main problem is that the gas effect itself doesn't really do anything. You can still light people on fire as Pyro, and that wouldn't exactly change even if you had an infinite amount of ways to apply gas to people. But in terms of just, like, making the gas effect more consistent, it's like, this is a cool one. I don't know what it would do, but it would make the weapon a little bit better, so sure. I'll hear you out. I will be cautiously optimistic. I honestly would love to see this tested, because I really actually don't know what this would do. But in terms of like a unique change that would help it a little bit, like, yeah, honestly, sure, why not? I'll give it a 3 out of 5. Okay, this one was one that I'm surprised I didn't see more often, because this is like the change that people suggest. But it's basically give Explode on Ignite to the base gas passer, but just make the damage a lot weaker. So obviously people aren't like immediately dying when they get coated. And this is one that I personally used to vouch for a while, but the problem that I have with this, the more that I think about it, is, again, you have to think about how easy it is to apply gas to any single target. You throw a can that has effectively a giant splash radius, and then a cloud lingers for a very long time, meaning that if people go through this, they are guaranteed to be inflicted by the debuff. And I think a guaranteed 75 damage is really high. Or I'll put it this way, you either make the damage from this basically meaningless, it's so low, or high enough that it's way too punishing for how easy it is to coat people in gas. And I can't see any balanced way of doing that. And maybe if you found some like magic threshold that perfectly balanced not being annoying to play against with actually benefiting you as the Pyro for throwing it, then sure, maybe I could vouch for this, but I just can't. I can't stand by this one until I see it tested pretty extensively. Because at the end of the day, just taking 75 unavoidable damage isn't fun. And as much as I want the Gas Passer to be a usable, interesting weapon, is it fun is going to take huge precedent over literally everything else, because there are a lot of already annoying weapons in this game, and we don't need to add to them. So this change specifically suggests 75 damage. I think that's too high. I think, like, imagine the following scenario. You're playing King of the Hill, a bunch of enemies are on the control point, you as the Pyro throw a gas can that lands on basically all of them, because again, if the gas can's coming at you, it's basically unavoidable. And then your team's Demo Man follows up by shooting a sticky bomb, and that blows up and inflicts 100 damage on everyone on the control point. But then they're also covered in gas, so they take 75 damage and afterburn immediately. Anyone that's below the health of a soldier is just gone. Like, they are simply erased from existence. And even soldiers are going to be, like, probably dead because of the afterburn that they're going to take. So I think that that's very high. Maybe, like 45 for some reason is the number that's sticking in my head, is, like, maybe the one that's going to be balanced, because that's still basically, like, a mini crit flare hit on everyone that gets coated. But it's not going to kill anyone from the afterburn, but it will force everyone to retreat. But then again, I feel like there are just better ways to force people to retreat that aren't just chunking them immediately for a bunch of their health. So I will give this change probably a 3 out of 5. Like, would it work? Would it make the Gas Passer better? Yes. Is there a number you could put in here that would functionally be fine in TF2? Yes, but I think we can do better. That's the main thing that I would have with this. So overall, pretty interesting set of secondary changes, also pretty interesting set of Gas Passer changes. Moving on to melees, let's start with the stock Fire Axe, which there actually were a couple suggestions for. First of all, the Fire Axe should do 8 seconds of bleed. So I tried as hard as I could to not put bleed for 8 seconds ones on here, but the Fire Axe specifically bleeding is a suggestion that I've seen since the pre-Grouch days, so I figured it's worth talking about this one. We'll give you all a little taste of what it's like to bleed for 8 seconds, just in case you've forgotten. So this is another one of those changes that lands squarely in the category of, like, it's cool, but what does it really do for the weapon it's on? Why is that encouraging me to use the Fire Axe over something like the Axtinguisher? Sure, you get damage over time that you can stack with afterburn, but Pyro's not, like, struggling for ways to quickly get kills when he's in close range. You don't really need to have a melee weapon that inflicts damage over time, because at the point you're that close to someone anyway, they're probably just going to be dead. You don't need them bleeding over time. You need them respawning over time. So again, like, while this would make the Fire Axe distinctly better, it would be an improvement from what we have. I think we can do better than this. I think we can try to find some kind of change for a stock weapon that would make it actually enticing to use, while also not being, like, horribly gimmicky or feeling like an unlock. So I'll give this one a 3 out of 5. It's an improvement, but it's not the improvement that I think would actually cause people to want to use it. And second Fire Axe change, which is a transitionary one because it mentions 2 melees, of one of which I'll be talking about next. The base Fire Axe, not the 3rd degree, mini crits burning players. The Axtinguisher fully crits burning enemies and extinguishes allies. And the Sharpened Volcano Fragment deals damage equal to the remaining target's afterburn. So one thing that I'll say up front about this, because I know this is a criticism that I've seen about other balance suggestions in the past, is that I have absolutely no problem with multiple weapons fulfilling the same niche for a class in different ways. Variety is the spice of life. I don't think we need exactly one weapon to do exactly one concept and then we can never touch it ever again. If Pyro wants to have 2 different ways to follow up on burning enemies that have nuances as to when you use one over the other, then sure, I think it's absolutely fine to allow people to make that choice, especially if the concept, like critting burning enemies in this case, is a particularly good one. And to be completely honest, this might be a hot take, I don't mind the base Fire Axe getting mini crits on burning enemies. I think it allows Pyro to have like a fairly consistent 3-hit combo where you puff someone with flames and then you can finish them off with 2 fire axe hits back to back for like 160 total damage. This would have the main differentiator from the normal Axtinguisher, which is that you can continuously like wail on enemies that are burning and you don't just get a single high damage hit. And also, I don't know how to explain it, but the fire axe just intuitively feels like a weapon that should be able to do that, right? Like that doesn't feel like a stat that I couldn't buy being on that weapon. Now, the second idea, the Axtinguisher fully critting burning enemies and extinguishing allies, I'm going to be honest, is a little bit based. You're going to notice a running theme where I think the Axtinguisher should be way better than it currently is. I don't know if it should extinguish allies, though. That's a little bit much. That's a little bit too much utility for a weapon that is already really, really good at damage if you let it crit. I think it actually is a good thing for TF2 to force Pyro to expend a resource to extinguish teammates, because if it was free, then one Pyro on one team and another Pyro on another team just cancel each other out. They might as well just not have Afterburn. The only way to do that right now is to use the Manmelter, which has a specialized function, but obviously that incurs like pretty big opportunity cost for your other secondaries, so that's not a problem. This, though, would not have any opportunity cost because this would be the best damaging melee Pyro would have access to, so maybe not that stat. That one's a little much. Now, letting the Axtinguisher just straight up crit burning enemies would be so much fun, you don't even understand, but it would also be broken as hell looking at the numbers. For some reason, I was under the impression that, like, crits on burning enemies with the Axtinguisher, like, only did 150 or so. Like, high-end mini crits were the same as low-end crits. That's not the case. The lowest end crit you're possibly getting with this is 191, which, that's 4 less damage than what the Axtinguisher used to do at the best state that it's ever been in TF2. And letting it get up to 371 damage in one hit would be insane. That's like, like, okay, honestly, I would love it, but like, I can't die on the hill of Pyro having that. That's like way too greedy to ask for, of letting Pyro just do a fucking nuclear bomb of damage on his melee. Although, then again, the old Axtinguisher did let you just get 2 crits back to back, which was about 371, so I don't know. Maybe this is not that unfair, because this does imply that you've inflicted 10 seconds of Afterburn, which is pretty hard to do. I guess, like, forcing people to do 2 crits does extend the amount of time that it takes to get that kill, which is probably necessary to do, but this one, like, okay, I'm gonna be real. My heart says hell yeah, and my brain says I can't do this. My public reputation cannot take the scorn from saying Pyro should be allowed to do 300 damage instantly. We gotta move on before I think too hard about this one. Oh wait, Sharpened Volcano Fragment deals damage equal to remaining Afterburn on the target. Okay, so that would make the first hit, again, assuming I'm doing the math right, because Extinguisher math is weird. For some reason, Valve just doesn't like Pyro having, like, easy things to figure out. So all of his weapons just required calculus degree to solve. I think, though, this means that you would deal 52 damage on the first hit, and 116 damage on the second hit, assuming your target's on fire. And then the third hit, you would add the extra, because I think the Volcano Fragment gives 8 seconds of Afterburn, maybe? Oh no, it's 7.5, so actually it would be 112 on the follow-up hit, and then on the final hit, assuming they've hit max Afterburn, it would be 132. And then if you randomly crit, then that's, like, insane amounts of damage. Honestly, I don't mind that at all, because, like, it doesn't get mini crits guaranteed or anything. Like, maybe you'd have to turn off random crits, but as just an easy way to make the Sharpened Volcano Fragment not terrible, even if it's a bit uninspired, maybe, yeah, this would work. This would be a functional way to make it, like, a decent damage dealer that has overlap with the Axtinguisher, but, like, pretty distinct use cases, in my opinion. So I'll rate this entire thing a 4 out of 5, because I like it, and I wish the Axtinguisher was way better than it currently is, but maybe this is too much. I don't really know. I'd have to see it tested. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so the first Axtinguisher one that's like just the Axtinguisher is make the Axtinguisher deal less damage. Truly a real visionary we've stumbled upon here. The enlightened take of the Axtinguisher deals too much damage. It shouldn't deal that much. This has the same energy as the one post where it's like the Giga Chad talking to the genie, and the genie's like, "Yo, what's your first wish? Triple world hunger. What's your okay? What's your second wish? Double all the student debt. Like, what your first wish? Make the Scorch Shot deal triple damage, and your next wish." Make the Axtinguisher deal half damage. Like, I will hand it to you, assuming this is rage bait, because I can't fathom who in TF2 is getting mad at the Axtinguisher. It is really funny. Obviously, that's a fucking 0 out of 5. I know it's rage bait, and I'm still mad. Get out of here. Oh my god, what is this? Okay, Axtinguisher inflicts bleed for 3 seconds and crits burning targets and heals depending on remaining afterburn duration, where the max health gained is a third of the total health, which I'm guessing is your total health. And then it has no random crits, extinguishes burning targets, and 15% damage penalty on non-burning targets. Wow, 15%. Don't go too crazy there. Could use some tweaking, but this may work? I don't know. Also, the reason for bleed is because you cannot tell me the axe covered in barbed wire is unable to cause bleeding. Like, what the fuck? Okay, so to some extent, I do appreciate weapons doing what they look like they should do, but I don't know if that's a can of rabbits you really want to go down, because there are a lot of weapons in TF2 that really just don't make any sense, and making them make sense would probably be miserable. Thing that I'll point to pretty obviously is the 6-shot grenade launcher. We don't need that. But yeah, there does probably have to be some amount of like creative liberties taken with the models versus the stats here. In this case, bleed for 3 seconds. What does this do? Like, you do 24 extra damage over time. Like, okay, I guess. What's the point? As far as the actual stats go, this would crit burning targets for a full 195. And it would heal depending on remaining afterburn durations. So if you had a full 10 seconds of afterburn applied, you would get a third of your total health back, which is what exactly? That's like effectively 55 health max. It's a little bit more, but you're never getting like perfect max afterburn there. But overall, like, I don't hate this one. I think the penalties could be a little bit more severe. Like 15% less damage on non-burning targets is... Okay, so for context, the original Axtinguisher had a 50% damage or penalty on non-burning targets. So maybe just do that instead. Like, that's pretty fair. Like, not being able to kill anything in the rare cases you need to with your melee is something, I guess. But also, like, doing 195 and inflicting bleed and immediately healing for 60 health is a lot of things. Like, I don't mind a weapon being really good at one specific thing, but if you let it be really good at one thing and then pretty good at other things too, then that just kind of obsoletes all of the possible use cases. So I'll give this a 3 out of 5. I honestly do like the tactical nuke that Pyro has in his pocket that just does up to like 300 more than this. Just again, because like, if you want a melee for sustain, you should have to run a melee for sustain. You shouldn't just not have to have opportunity cost with the melees that you pick. All right, moving to the singular one that I found for the back scratcher. The back scratcher scratches the backs of friendly players. This is charged up by a meter, relaxing them and giving mini crits for 4 seconds. So unfortunately, most of my balance analysis for this would come down to how long the meter actually takes to charge, because if that's something you can do like every 8 seconds or whatever, that would be busted. Letting most of your team have mini crits at any given time is like crazy work. Or even just like one person, you just follow a heavy around. Or hell, mini crit boost an engineer, which also makes his sentry do mini crits. Like, and you can just sit there behind the engineer and like continuously give him mini crits for no penalty. Like, that's a little insane. But if it's something that takes a really long time to charge, then it doesn't really do anything. So this is definitely another one where I'm not sure what the magic number is that you'd have to strike for this to be usable, but that's not to say there isn't one. I'm not sure what this really does for the back scratcher, to be honest. Like, it adds another use case, sure, but out of all of Pyro's melees, I don't think the back scratcher was the one lacking in use cases. Like, it was pretty well defined in what it can and can't do, in my opinion. And also, the use case that it is defined in is more of a flanking playstyle. It directly encourages you to find health packs, which is something that becomes harder to do if you're playing around your team, and discourages you from being healed by medics and dispensers, which is something that becomes way easier playing around your team. So I don't think this synergizes with the design. Again, as cute as the thing here is, like, obviously I get the pun. I don't think this is like really a good weapon to put this on. So I'll give this a like 2.5 out of 5. I think 2 is a little harsh, because like maybe giving Pyro some kind of supportive utility would be nice, but this specific stat on this specific weapon just ain't it. For the Lollichop, first of all, we will do a change that I had alluded to at the very beginning, where someone had included a Lollichop change alongside of like a couple class changes, and that is that the Lollichop now provides +6 health regeneration when held that ramps up like the Conqueror, but also has -15 max HP on wear to bring him down to 160 total. I honestly don't hate the idea of that. Again, to get the elephant out of the room here, if we're going to be reworking weapon reskins, like, again, minus the meme, get the meme out of your head, all right? This is a serious discussion. What are you doing? But if we're reworking reskins to not just be, like, identical to stock or another weapon, you have to make a really compelling case to do so, where it's like, this is a function that really fits the weapon, you can't put on any other weapon as a rebalance, and maybe like the thing it's a reskin of is just boring, so why bother having a reskin at all? In this case, I kind of agree. We don't really need a reskin of the Fire Axe, so I wouldn't mind this being a reskin of something else at least. And giving like health regeneration while you have it out is a pretty creative way to do that. And I don't think Pyro has that many like healing based melees. And a giant piece of candy, I could buy that being a healing-based melee, right? I'd probably only rate this at like a 3 out of 5. I'll go with that for the rating, because I don't know if I like these stats enough to the point where I would ever use this in-game. -15 max health isn't a ton, but it is a pretty big ask for Pyro. Pyro does rely on his HP pool a fair amount, because he has to like get in the range and kill people while he's in that range before they can kill him. And health regeneration while you have it out is really good, but I would probably rather just run the back scratcher and then not take the HP penalty and then get comparable amounts of healing in situations where I'm already retreating. So I would probably not recommend the max health be the penalty for this, but yeah, like the general idea I do like, of just you hold it and then it regens you. It's pretty simple, pretty to the point. Maybe, again, if you made it a different downside, I'd like it more, but this is not quite the point where I'd like it to be. Oh, and then he also suggests that the Powerjack loses its health on kill to come with this. I don't think that's necessary. I think that you can have 2 weapons that do similar functions. Maybe I'd remove it for other reasons, but because you're not making the Lollichop a reskin anymore is probably not why I would take that stat off the Powerjack. The Lollichop should have Holiday Punch stats. No. Okay, so here's the deal. The reason why the Holiday Punch isn't horribly annoying to play against already is because it's on the literal slowest class in the entire game, who, if you got into the range of a heavy who's revved up anyway, you're just gonna die. It's really not that hard to avoid a Holiday Punch heavy if you even kind of know he's there. Pyro, on the other hand, is not only just way faster running by default than heavy, like 40% faster, which means that he probably will catch up to you if he really wants to, which is really powerful in snuffing Ubers. But he also has like actual mobility tools. He has the Detonator and the Jetpack, which could let you get behind someone really easily. And yeah, I think people would stop finding the Holiday Punch tickle stat funny if it was actually good. That's the take that I'll give. Full stuns are like really, really powerful, and you gotta make sure that you're reserving them for like horribly ineffective meme tactics. So I'll give this one a 2 out of 5. The only reason that I'm not doing a 1 is because Pyro could just be running like the Axtinguisher or the Backburner or something. Like, there are plenty of scenarios where Pyro already kills you for free if he gets behind you, so I don't know if it's like as egregious as someone like Scout would be, but yeah, the idea of instantly dying makes me less mad than getting stunned for 8 seconds and then dying. So I don't put the Holiday Punch stat on anything but the Holiday Punch. The Lollipop should apply a slowdown effect to enemies, trying to mimic a sticky-like effect for like 1 or 2 seconds. So this is a less egregious version of the one that I just looked at, but I think the same principle stands, where I don't know if stun effects should be in TF2. We should try to limit those as much as possible. Now, for only 2 seconds, that's actually slow enough where I don't think that does anything. Like, sure, Pyro can keep you in his range, but he already is in your range if he lands the hit. And if he air blasts you away, by the time you catch up to the person you air blasted in 2 seconds, it's gonna be worn off. So I don't think this does anything, and the only things that I even could think of it doing are just kind of annoying and inconvenient, and that's it. So I don't... Like, okay, I see what you're going for. This is yet another one where I can understand why this is a stat that someone thought of. I just don't agree with it being a thing. So I'll give it a 2 out of 5. I think that seems pretty fair. The Lollichop, new licking taunt that grants healing, which is a small health packs amount. Wait, a licking taunt. So the main question that I have with this is, how is the Pyro licking it exactly? Do we see like a little tongue come out of the gas mask? Because that would be one of the most horrifying images ever. That would make me think of the stupid, I don't even remember what it's called. That one cursed, like, fox goop cosmetic that keeps getting passed around the Steam Workshop. Or the one Halloween cosmetic, which I think is actually called the Lollichop Licker, which people also pair with the fox head too much. I don't know what it is with, like, fox furries and, like, the weirdest shit on planet Earth with licking people, but... this would be cute in terms of like a balance change. I really don't mind. This would make it a direct upgrade to the stock fire axe, but that's also not saying much because the 3rd degree is already a direct upgrade, so sure, why not? I'll give this one a 4 out of 5 though. I don't think it would break anything. You do have to like full stun yourself for a couple seconds to get a small health pack's worth of healing. But it's just a nice little Easter egg. It would be cool. And also probably horribly cursed, depending on what the taunt animation is. Here's the singular change for the Powerjack that I found. I've never thought this should be an actual change. The Powerjack is already default for a lot of Pyro players, but I've always liked the idea of it giving the disciplinary action effect whenever you hit another player, so they'd speed up too. So I do agree that, like, the Powerjack probably shouldn't be made any better than it already is. Like, you would have to... buff all of the other melees to such an insane degree where the Powerjack would be among the weaker choices. And I don't know what you'd be doing to make a universal speed boost a weaker choice. Like, that would be a hellish nightmare balance scenario. But I don't mind the idea of a Pyro melee having a disciplinary action effect, just maybe not this one. Hint, hint. I don't know what that could mean. Anyway, yeah, don't do this on the Powerjack. That would be probably too much. The one that I found for the Homewrecker, which is surprising because I thought there would be more. I don't know how useful it'd be, but I'd like to change the Homewrecker so that it can't destroy spy sappers, but instead, when a Pyro has it equipped, they can use enemy dispensers and teleporters. So Spy can literally wreck a home by demolishing it, or be a Homewrecker by having an affair with the enemy buildings. So because there aren't any other Homewrecker ones, I'll say on this one, I personally am on board with the idea that the Homewrecker being able to destroy spy sappers is just too much. I don't know why Valve thought that there should be weapons at all that counter the sapper. It's like the sapper itself is already a dead slot in Spy's kit 99% of the time. And then when he goes to sap a sentry, it's not hard for the engineer to remove it too. And it's not like sentry guns are some like poor oppressed feature in this game. Like, they're incredibly powerful. They're easily one of the best defensive tools in the entire game. There's a lot of times like most of your team just can't deal with them until the spy actually does something. So the fact that the spy can sacrifice his life, put a sapper on a building after killing the engineer, and then because he didn't know that a Pyro had the Homewrecker equipped, the sapper is removed and a sack play is undone. I don't like that. I know people sit there and say, oh, well, it's Team Fortress 2. It's a team game. Okay, well, guess whose team is now struggling because I sacked to put a sapper on there and that got undone because of one weapon doing one action for free. Like, I don't think just saying it's a team game because team is in the title justifies adding literally any sort of interaction that encourages teamwork, because there are definitely toxic ones that should not be in TF2. At the very least, if you did want to let it destroy sappers, the idea that I've had with it for a while is the Homewrecker can destroy the sapper, but the building doesn't come back online and like stop being disabled until the owning engineer comes back and repairs it. So like, it stops losing health, the sentry doesn't go down, you still have a level 3 to work with, but it's not doing anything, it's not like back in the game until the engineer himself is has dealt with the situation. So that way, a Pyro can't just undo a sack play. That's the main thing, because sack plays are very common, and if there's a bunch of sentries like on a last point, then what do you do if not for a sack play as Spy? Anyway, as far as this change goes, I don't know why, as Pyro, you're ever going to be in the situation where there's just an enemy dispenser or teleporter that you can use freely that like no one else on the enemy team is aware of. Like usually when an engineer nest goes down, your team destroys the entire thing. They don't just leave the teleporter and dispenser because lol. Like they ravage the place. If there's something that's not on your team color, it's going to be reduced to shrapnel. And especially enemy teleporters, the only instance where I could think that that would ever come into play is if you somehow got so far behind enemy lines as Pyro that you made it to their spawn and were able to take the teleporter entrance. But if it's still being used, the sentry is probably going to be in range of the teleporter, so that's going to be a death sentence most of the time. You're just going to take it and immediately get evaporated. So, or even if not a sentry, like most of the enemy team. So I can't imagine that ever being a good idea if you value your life in any capacity. So this is just kind of a nothing change. Like this would be so niche. This would probably make it into one of my, like, the most useless stats in TF2 videos. Because, like, this would be probably less used than the third degree in terms of, like, a utility stat. It's creative. I like it in concept, but, like, in an actual game of TF2, this would do literally nothing, like, the vast, vast majority of the time. So I'll give this a 2 out of 5. Okay, let's do the Neon Annihilator. Neon Annihilator gets 20% damage penalty against dry enemies instead of a normal all-around damage penalty. So first of all, pretty obviously in my opinion, the problem with the Neon is that it only gets critical hits in very specific situations, and outside of those, mostly is a direct downgrade. It can remove sappers from buildings for some reason. Again, like I talked about in the Homewrecker, I don't agree that it should do that, but whatever. But the entire gimmick of the weapon and the main draw is that it deals crits to wet enemies, and TF2 doesn't really have that many maps with prominent water on them. Like, if I had to give an estimate, I think, like, only a third of the maps in the entire game actually have water on them at all, and only a very small part of those maps have water in areas where you're actually going a lot of the time. Like, I know people joke about, what map is it? Like, Frontier has a little puddle outside of spawn, and that's literally the only water, and theoretically, like, you could get use out of the Neon Annihilator to spawn camp or whatever, but obviously that's kind of a throw. But the biggest problem with the Neon is that it's basically the only weapon in TF2 that only works on some parts of some maps. It's very strangely designed, and the consistency is the bigger problem, not necessarily that you're not doing full 195 on crits. But even though that's the main problem, I will agree that the fact that even in the optimal scenario, this only does about as much damage as the Axtinguisher, which you can use literally anywhere, I don't think that that's something that should happen. I would be perfectly fine only making the penalty apply to dry enemies if you wanted to make it so if you actually happen to line up finding someone in water, so I don't know if you're camping in the 2 fort sewers, then sure, get a full crit. Maybe it would be annoying to like instantly die to crits all the time, but I really don't think this would pose any major balancing challenges. So I'll give this one like a 3 out of 5. Like, would I like to see this in TF2? Sure. But obviously, again, it doesn't really fix the problem with the Neon of it being super situational and the situations, I guess, kind of being out of your control. I was gonna say, like, you can't really control them, but you could theoretically just only queue for maps that have water on them, so I don't know. This is a really weird weapon. I've never really liked how just arbitrary it is. IDK how well this would work, but here goes. The Neon Annihilator lights up enemies on hit. Considering it can already remove sappers, it being able to highlight the spy if you manage to catch him in a hit may be a fun mechanic. It's giving info instead of a more direct balance change, so IDK how useful this is for better players. I just like how the Neon Annihilator looks and wanted something unique attached to it. Okay, so first of all, I will say I've had this opinion for years and years that highlighting an enemy on hit is something that more weapons should do. Considering how TF2 is designed, where, to quote the Uncle Dane, to paraphrase the Uncle Dane video very roughly, TF2 is basically a single-player game with everyone, like, engaging in 1v1 duels and doing their own thing until, like, a certain point where everyone has to focus on the objective or else they lose. I've always thought that having features like being able to highlight enemies for your entire team to see would be a really easy way to kind of help your team naturally focus on one specific high priority target that doesn't require you to actually get on the voice chat and comm. Due to TF2 being more reserved to being a social game, I don't think occupying the microphone space is or at least should be, a requiring balancing factor for a lot of stuff. Or I guess to rephrase, if the only counter to something is to actually coordinate with your team on the microphone, it's a bad mechanic. I don't think that you should have to be listening in order to play the game effectively. But again, some kind of mechanic that lets you highlight enemies through walls not only gives you a selfish mechanic that you can benefit from personally, but it shows your entire team that information too. Meaning that just through you naturally playing, they now have some form of basic coordination that they can follow without even realizing they're doing it a lot of the time. Anyway, all of that to say, I think that highlighting enemies through walls, while in my opinion a great feature that the game should play into, really isn't something that Pyro would want on his melee of all things. If, like you mentioned in here, you're trying to track a spy, you have a flamethrower that lights him on fire, and then the flames follow him, and you already know where he is. I don't really think you would ever want to pull out your melee that's designated to work in the water, deal like 40 damage to a spy, and then you have the same effect as just WM1ing him. I don't know when you would ever get use out of that. And like I mentioned for a lot of the other weapons, the way that Pyro is designed is that he does a lot of damage up close. And if you're already that close to an enemy, you don't really need to mark them and highlight them through walls. You could just kill them, unless they're a revved heavy or something, in which case, like, why are you going for 40 damage melee hits anyway? So while I do think that highlighting enemies is a really cool mechanic that should be on some weapons in TF2, probably not this one. I'll give this a 2.5 out of 5. I like the general idea. I want to give my support to the highlighting through walls mechanic, but on a Pyro melee, this would not do too much. Also, looking on here, I'm very surprised at like how many suggestions there were for certain weapons. The Neon Annihilator had 2. Those are the only ones that I found, and that's very surprising because this weapon's like pretty bad. But the third degree had 6. So let's do that one now. I'm surprised of how many there were. I feel like people forget this is even a weapon to begin with. I have a silly one. Besides keeping the funny stat, the third degree now mini-crits anyone connected via the Medi-Beam that you hit and can see Medi-Beam connections through walls within a reasonable range while deployed. A full default grounded booties Demo Knight charge worth of distance is what they're using for comparison here. However, this weapon now has a 35% switch speed penalty, and you take 50% more damage from medics while the weapon is deployed. It keeps the idea intact while making it more effective and easy to find medics, while giving said medics a way to fight back at the cost of, not healing during it. Okay, so the very first criticism that I have, which is kind of a minor thing, but it is, I guess, important here, is that there is no precedent in TF2 of anything forcing you to take more damage from a specific class only. Actually, no, there is. The Nostromo Napalmer has an Easter egg stat where you have to have the entire item set, but I don't think that really counts. As far as like actual serious intended balancing decisions go, I don't think making it so you very obviously have a disadvantage or an advantage against any one specific class is the way to do it. Damage types are the closest thing that we have, but again, like some classes share damage types, like even fire damage can be used by soldier and heavy a little bit, so there's some kind of way that other classes can do that, but just saying like damage against X or Y class decreased or increased, like I don't like that. I don't think that there's any standing of which we should pull from in TF2, or I guess which there is to pull from. Outside of that though, I do think that this is a very solid starting point for a weapon. I think this would still be pretty bad. This actually might be worse than the current third degree, just because a 35% switch speed penalty, which I'm guessing, I'm going to interpret this as a switch 2 speed penalty, because otherwise, if that's universal on Pyro, this would be abysmal dog shit. This is a reverse degreaser for him for a very, very niche upside, so I'm going to assume it's just like a deploy speed penalty. But if you think about the context in which Pyro is even able to use this in the first place, that's still pretty bad. Just because, like, if you're running at a medic and his pocket with your flamethrower out, that's necessarily always going to be better by default. So with this, switching weapons to even try to get a random crit and kill both of them with the third degree wouldn't really be viable anymore. It would take so long that there would be no reason to go for third degree hits basically ever. Now, mini crits on anyone connected via Medi-Beam, I really do like, but I have a hot take. I think that you should go further. I don't think that's going far enough. It should just be full crits. Just let Pyro basically instantly delete anyone that's like connected via Medi-Beam, which might sound absurd, like, oh my god, you're getting guaranteed crits on not only one person, but 2 at the same time, like that's overpowered as fuck. You have to remember though that Pyro basically already can do this. A lot of the time, if you're just running at a medic in his pocket, like you're gonna get a random crit. And that's not really something that people complain about in the current game. Now, given, I would be willing to accept the argument where it's like, that is inherently a very unfun thing to deal with, and the only thing preventing Pyros from going for it as it is the fact that it's not guaranteed. And the people that die have a bit more forgiveness, I guess, just because it was random. I don't know. But I really don't think, just again, because of what Pyro has to do to get in close against especially like a heavy medic combo, I don't think just instantly getting a crit would be a problem. Anyway, though, that's a different discussion. That's not what you put. Mini crits would be fine. That would allow you to, two-shot the medic if he doesn't have overheal. Maybe three-shot him if he does, I think. Yeah, that's doing 87 damage. So that lets you, at the very least, guarantee to hit a medic, and you didn't say to remove random crits, so you could still one-shot. So, overall, I don't mind that. Again, if we're keeping random crits on the weapon, at least guaranteeing that you get a two-shot against the medic is fine. I think that's a solid buff to give it. But the switch speed penalty, I think, is a little bit much, and the damage versus medics really wouldn't do anything. Like, here's the deal. If a medic is rushing you down with his Ubersaw, you know what you don't want to do as Pyro? Try to engage in a melee duel. You want to pull out your flamethrower, burn him, and air blast him back, and now suddenly, not only do you not have the damage vulnerability, but the medic can't really do anything. So I don't think this would matter literally at all. In fact, this might actually be, well, kind of a buff, because now the medic only gets 2 Ubersaws on you at max instead of 3. But even then, like, that's such a specific thing that I don't... I don't think that's doing anything. Anyway, sorry, I've been rambling about this one a lot. The third degree is a really strange design space in TF2, so there's a lot to kind of parse through here, but I like where this is going, but I don't like, I guess, exactly where it is. I'll give it maybe a 3 out of 5. I think that's fair. Third degree / complete rework. Okay, so this is like creating a new weapon from the ground up. Remove the hitting patient and healer stat. Okay, so we're starting at the fire axe, basically. On hitting a burning enemy, any enemies within a close area, about 280 hammer units take equal to 50, or damage equal to 50% of what was dealt by the swing, and it deals 25% more damage per hit. The downside is it extinguishes the directly hit enemy and reduces enemies afterburn by 2 seconds if they're nearby, and it can't random crit. Ooh, okay, so this one is interesting. Before I start, I will say that I am not a fan of removing the connected Medibeam damage transfer stat at all. I get where you're going with this. I get that it's a similar concept, but even though it is kind of gimmicky, I do think that it's really cool. It's an easy way to counter stuff like the Vaccinator. It allows Pyro to get potentially massive plays off if he's able to properly flank a medic and his combo. It's just fun, is the main thing, too. Like, I really love running at a pocket and trying to get a random crit and, like, killing a medic. It's like, I don't know. This is what I like to call a neuron activation weapon, where it has one very specific use case, but it's that one picture of, like, monkey neuron activation when I see that use case come up, and I will go for it every single time, regardless of whether it kills me. It's just fun. And it's not so bad or gimmicky that I don't think it doesn't justify its own existence. Now, as far as this one goes, I actually really don't mind the concept. The unfortunate thing that I will say, though, is that I have tried a very similar design on, I believe it was the What's Rebalance mod, and people found it a little bit less than intuitive to immediately die to someone else getting hit by a melee weapon when you're nearby. There isn't really... So, okay, the thing with the Medigun damage transfer is that there is a physical particle that's connecting both of the players. Like, when you see that interaction happen, whether you're on the receiving end or the giving end, or you're just like a new player that's watching it go down, there is at least some kind of visual thing that makes it look like that should be happening. If you're just dealing, like, telekinetic damage to anyone that's nearby, though, that's a little bit strange. Like, sometimes, especially if you're through walls, I guess that's the other thing, too, is that the Medibeam requires line of sight, so necessarily that's kind of a problem that you avoid. But with this, again, it's like, I could be on the other side of a wall and randomly die because... So, okay, hold on. When I hit a burning enemies, it's any enemy within a close area, not anyone that I have on fire. So yeah, like, if I'm just someone else that doesn't even know that the fight's going on, I could just randomly die through the wall because my dumbass teammate got lit on fire and hit. And that, especially if you're a new player, would be very confusing. But even if you're experienced, it's just like, it's just more random shit to kill you without you really being able to react to it, which I don't agree with at all. Maybe if we made this so it's like only enemies that you have on fire, or only enemies that are within line of sight, or maybe when you like pull this out, there's some kind of visual indication of who's about to get hit, and again, you're not on the other side of a wall. I think that's kind of the main deal breaker for me at this point. Then sure, I wouldn't mind this being a design to try out for a weapon, but as you suggested it, again, having experienced the what shows change, I can't agree with this. It's just a little bit too bullshit on the receiving end, so I'll give it a 2.5 out of 5. I think there is potential. Like, it's really not as bad as some of the other ones that I've seen. And unlike the what's, like, this actually does require you to light an enemy on fire, which, okay, now that I think about it, doesn't really change anything, because it's not like, again, if you're in the scenario that I fear, where you're on the other side of a wall and you randomly die because your teammate got hit, that doesn't really change anything, because you never got lit on fire in that case. But it's not terrible, but there are definitely a lot of things that you would have to do to make this more visually apparent what's happening, so you're not just dying to psychic damage. I always thought it would be interesting to make the 3rd degree crit or mini-crit enemies that have been healed recently rather than just connected to the meta-beam. For example, if a demo picks up a health pack, say 3 seconds ago, then you would be able to crit him. I feel like this would need some kind of indicator though, and it would still be too niche for a weapon to be good. So yeah, the main issue that I would have with this you already addressed, of there needing to be some kind of visual indicator, both for the pyro and for the person on the receiving end, which, okay, here's the deal too, right? Like, this is a really weird meta argument to pull, but right now there is no precedent for recently getting healed being a dangerous thing in TF2. So even if there was a visual indicator where there's like some kind of status effect that appears above your health bar when you just picked up a health pack, that just feels really weird, especially because the only reason that debuff, I guess, would be there in the first place is because of a very, very niche weapon in the grand scheme of things. So I feel like this is like reworking too much of the game for such a specific upside. And maybe a debuff wouldn't be needed, because I guess if you're on the receiving end, like, you're gonna know if you got healed in the last couple seconds, whereas the pyro hitting you is obviously not going to, so he would need an indicator. But even then, it's like, I don't know if this would ever really be something worth going for in the middle of combat, because if I'm seeing an enemy retreat for health, chances are they're picking up like a small health pack and they're not going to be at full, in which case WM1ing them is still going to be the more effective strategy than risking melee hit detection to get a crit. And it would have to be a crit. A mini crit would do basically nothing. Like, that would make this even more gimmicky than it already is. But I don't know. Overall, I'm very mixed about this design. Like, I see where you're coming from, but I just don't think this would end up doing too much in the grand scheme of things. So I'll give this a 2.5. It's not the worst thing that I've ever seen, but I can't really... I would need to see it tested, I guess is where I'm going. Rework for the 3rd degree. You still hit people who are connected via Medi-Beam, alongside a 25% damage bonus to indirect players and a 25% damage penalty to direct players. You deal 81 damage to indirect players connected via Medi-Beam, which means you can 2-shot medics if you directly hit their target. This is another one where I see where you're coming from, but I think that this is too many stats to add to a weapon that doesn't need this level of nuance in its balancing. Like, okay, again, I've tried to make it pretty clear, but my opinion on the 3rd degree is that, like, it's a good starting point for a weapon. It just needs to be more reliable in the situations where you want to use it, and should probably come with some kind of downside to offset that a little bit. This is a little bit too much, though. I think that, realistically speaking, it shouldn't matter if you're hitting the target or the medic. You should be able to 2-shot medics if they're healing a patient, because otherwise this is horribly unreliable, and it's going to be worth going for your flamethrower every single time. Because, like, imagine you're flanking a medic in his pocket, and the only person that you can reliably hit is the medic himself. Well, if you're directly hitting the medic, you have a 25% damage penalty, which means you're only dealing 48 damage per hit. So you can't even 3-shot the guy. It takes 4 entire melee hits to kill the medic. And like, maybe that's a good thing because you are dealing 81 against the pocket, but here's the deal. By the time the pocket is taking 4 melee hits a lot of the time, then he's gonna turn around and kill you because 4 melee hits kills, what, a demo and a soldier at full overheal because it's 320, and maybe not even a soldier. I think actually by the time you deal 4 hits, the soldier is regenerated at least 20 HP from healing, so this would be even worse in situations where it already needs to be improved in. And sure, if you hit the pocket twice, then the medic dies, but then you're still left with a pocket with a lot of health. And like, again, the draw of the third degree as it is that you run in and you might get the random crit. And now not only is the medic dead, but the pocket is on really low health and you have an advantage in the 1v1 duel that you've created. But in this case, like, even if the medic's dead, I don't really want to be right in the face of an overhealed heavy. Like, I would want that heavy to be weakened enough to where I have some kind of fighting chance without his medic. So yeah, I even argued earlier that I personally think guaranteed mini crits against targets connected via Medibeam would be fine, but still a little bit on the weaker side. And this would effectively be weaker than mini crits in the best case scenario and a damage penalty in the worst case. And yeah, this is just too much stuff. I don't think that we should get this complicated. I'll give this a 2 out of 5 because I see where you're coming from. I don't think so. I think this would make the third degree worse than what it already is, personally. For the third degree, I'd keep the current stat and add something like guaranteed critical hits against opponents with full health alongside a decent damage penalty to avoid breaking too many thresholds. If that's too much, I'd go with crits against overhealed players, but that's more niche and would be used more as a kunai counter than anything else and wouldn't make it any less situational than it currently is. Yeah, so this is way more along the lines of what I'm thinking for what the third degree should do. If you walk up on someone that you see has overheal, which, okay, I'll get to the full health thing in a minute, but for now we'll say overheal. Then you can see the particles, you walk up on them, and you get a guaranteed crit. And we'll just say for the sake of this argument, if you hit one person and either of them are overhealed, then it counts as the target, quote-unquote, being overhealed and you get the crit. That would be fine. Honestly, I don't have any problem with that because there's visual information. You can guarantee the kill in specific situations, which means there's reason to go for it over the flamethrower. And I think, I don't know, overall that's just a better, more compelling reason to actually equip this thing. As far as critting full health enemies, I like that stat quite a bit. Again, I think that that is something that gives it more use cases outside of just medics, basically. But the only concern that I would have is that Pyro doesn't really have a way to see if you're at full health. So maybe letting you see enemy health thresholds while it's active would be it. I don't know. Maybe that's too many things for a weapon to do. I don't know what downside you'd even give it at that point. Honestly, I don't even think a damage penalty is what I would do. I think that guaranteeing you deal 195 and, like, outpace the flamethrower for a single hit is necessary. But I don't know. I don't know what you do. Maybe a damage vulnerability while it's active, so it's risk reward. Anyway, as far as what you put here, I like this actually quite a bit. It's hard for me to give like a precise analysis just because you didn't give any numbers, like depending on what the damage penalty is, that might affect how well I score it, but I'll give it a 4 out of 5. I actually do believe that, yeah, like a guaranteed crit and enemies that are at high health, so that way it has more use cases than just a medic pocket buster, would be fine. I don't know what downside you'd give it. I don't think a damage penalty is what you would need to do to properly make this a side grade to the flamethrower, which I mean is what you're competing with when you're trying to do a damage dealing pyro melee. Third degree rework. On a hit, a victim cannot receive healing from any source for 5 seconds, and if the victim was being healed, their healers are forcibly switched off their medigun for 10 seconds and can't switch back. And it also has a 35% damage penalty and a 20% slower swing speed. Okay, so this is already a very interesting design. The stat that I immediately latch onto here in a negative way is the switching away from a weapon and can't switch back. This is kind of a pet peeve of mine for people suggesting like rebalances for TF2 weapons, because I really don't think that would be fun to deal with. In this case, like, you're not left defenseless, like you're actually forced into a position where you defend yourself as medic, so I don't think this would be too bad, but this does deny your ability to activate Uber at all, which, even if you can't heal, like, being able to preserve your Uber and get away is something, at least. That's something that you would want to do in that scenario that you would no longer be able to. So really any stat that removes that much player agency, I just think should be avoided. And in this case, I don't think it would be too bad just because it is on a Pyro melee. I think it would be like more of a Holiday Punch situation where it's like on any other weapon this would be broken, but just because of the context, it's technically fine. But I just disagree with that being in TF2 in general. Now, unhit victim can't receive healing from any source for 5 seconds. That is extremely punishing. That's brutal. I don't really mind the 3rd degree reducing healing, but completely blocking it is absurd, because not only does that prevent you from picking up health packs, that prevents the medic from regenerating, that prevents, like, soldiers from using their black box if you walk up and hit him, which, again, I guess that's not really a big deal, because you do have a flamethrower that can air blast. But I think a complete denial of healing is pretty insane. What I would like to see instead is the native flamethrower heal reduction that applies just while you're burning enemies and while they have afterburn, which is, I believe, a complete blocking from level 1 dispensers and payload carts, so you can't get healed by those at all. A pretty sharp reduction, like 75% or so from level 2 dispensers, and like a 50% reduction from level 3 dispensers and mediguns, I think is how that works out. And that at least lets you do something. You're not just completely screwed if you get hit and your entire game plan is healing, but it does punish you at least a fair amount. It does reduce medic's dominance in that situation. So yeah, maybe that's a better idea than just complete blocking of healing. And the other 2 stats, like, just mean you're never getting kills, which is fine, I think. But yeah, overall, I actually don't mind this direction to take the 3rd degree. I think that it's pretty sensible. It lets Pyro successfully deal with more powerful strategies like medic pockets. But yeah, maybe not a complete heal blocking. I think that's just a little bit much. So I'll give this, I think, a 3.5. I think that it's a good start. It's a good direction to take the weapon, but I would be hesitant just dropping this in the TF2 as it is. And then finally, this was attached to a Phlog rework earlier. The 3rd degree should have the Solemn Vow stat of being able to see enemy health in addition to its normal Medibeam damage transfer at the cost of 25% swing speed. Since Pyro could use a tool that makes his combos more consistent, and the 3rd degree is the stock Fire X in 99% of situations, this solves both problems at the same time. Honestly, I don't mind that at all, but more so for the sake of being able to see how much damage you're doing, like, to a medic with the 3rd degree itself. Because the main reason why you'd want to, like, see enemy health as Pyro is if you're using the Axtinguisher. That's like one of the least consistent weapons in Pyro's entire kit. Now, like, flare comboing still matters because you still want to burn the enemy for varying amounts of time before you hit the flare. But yeah, if you replace the melee with something else, then that removes the most important use case for when you would be, like, really needing to evaluate how much health the enemy has in comparison to, like, how much damage you've dealt already. But yeah, overall, it's a pretty inoffensive and thematic rework I would mind to see in the game, so I'll give it a 4 out of 5. Okay, so now we are on to the last 2 weapons, which had, I think, probably the most amount of changes, just because other than the Gas Passer, they are pretty easily the worst weapons in Pyro's entire kit. Those being, of course, the Sharpened Volcano Fragment and the Hot Hand. We'll start with the Sharpened Volcano Fragment because I do think it's, like, marginally the worst out of the 2. For context, what I think the problem with it is, and what most people think, is that lighting people on fire is cool and all, but Pyro can already do that with, like, 90% of the weapons that he can equip in every other slot. He's guaranteed to have a flamethrower that does more damage per second, has a longer range, also lights people on fire, and, like, there's no benefit to using the Volcano Fragment even if you are in range to do so. So, with that in mind, let's see how the good people of my community want to fix it. I have one for the Sharpened Volcano Fragment. Keep the downside, but change the upside to on hit burn for unlimited seconds, probably 500 for practical purposes. Also, bump the afterburn damage up by 50%, so it does 6 per tick, meaning 12 per second. Over an infinite amount of time. That would be quite interesting. It's still afterburn. You can still remove it in like 10 different ways, but now you have to. It puts people on a strict timer that will kill them if they don't do anything about it. It can be used as a Hail Mary for when you're about to die or to really annoy spies. Granted, Pyro doesn't need more tools to do that than he already has, which, yeah, I kind of agree. It won't outclass WM1ing with the flamethrower, but I can at least think of some use cases which couldn't be said about the base version. So, okay, the first question that I would have with this is, how does this work with the Axtinguisher? Does Does it just do infinite damage now? Like, if you walk up to someone that has infinite afterburn time remaining, and that infinite afterburn time gets added to your on-hit damage, do they just, like, cease to exist? Do they get banned from the server? Like, how does that work? That would be awesome, actually. My actual complaint with this, which I think is one that I've mentioned several times earlier, is that I don't think Afterburn itself should be something you're relying on to kill enemies. I think that it's fine to have it to add a little bit of pressure. It does make enemy movement a bit more predictable. Like if you shoot someone with a flare, you know a lot more reliably where they're going to move. They're going to try to find a health pack or water, and they're probably going to like take a straight line to it, so your follow-up flare is going to be easier to hit. Afterburn is really good for like making enemies on low health retreat, which I think is fine. If you're trying to take a battle with a Pyro not at full health, then I mean, you are probably going to be punished for it. And it does generally force you, even if you are at full health, to fall back if you don't want to be finished off by other sources of damage. But damage over time in TF2, I think most people find to be annoying enough to play against that, like, I really don't agree that it should be something that can reliably get kills from start to finish on its own. So Unlimited Afterburn, despite this being one that I've actually seen a few times before for the Volcano Fragment, I just really don't like the concept of, because either the enemy team has a reliable source to extinguish their teammates, in which case it does nothing, or they don't, and then it's just really, really annoying, because then you hit someone and it doesn't matter if they kill you, chances are they're going to die unless they immediately disengage the fight right then and there to go find healing. And I don't think that's fun. I don't think post-mortem kills in general are something that people want to have to deal with too often. So does this solve the problem with the Volcano Fragment? I mean, actually not really, because even you mentioned, like, it doesn't really surpass WM1. Chances are, if you get in, like, that close quarters of an encounter with someone, you can just burn them and they're gonna die anyway, or you're going to die, like, even before you can land the melee hit. Like, if you're running at a heavy, for instance, good luck even getting the Volcano Fragment hit, but yeah, I don't think this really does too much. So I'll rate it like a I'll rate it like a 2.5 out of 5. That's fine. I think it makes it better, but not in a way that's like really engaging to play against, or in a way that changes like how you use it. Maybe a little bit, but not too much. Make the Volcano Fragment deal mini crits to players with no effects, so like not wet, not burning, etc. Or no, sorry, it deals mini certs. Real talk though, I don't mind this at all. I think a reverse Axtinguisher is another one that I've seen actually a fair amount of times. It's really hard to come up with something like brand new and original for the Volcano Fragment, so I don't really blame people for like accidentally reinventing a wheel here. But I do think this would be like a good way to encourage people to start fights with the Volcano Fragment. Like I don't even think you have to make it against players with no debuffs whatsoever. Just enemies that aren't already on fire take mini crits, and that would be a perfect way to make it even a little bit better. The thing people use the Volcano Fragment for already is as more of a combo starter rather than a combo finisher, which this would allow for pretty well. The problem is that it also still has the damage penalty, so I honestly think you could just take that off and make it mini crit and it would be fine. This is a little bit tangential, but one of the things that I have been on board with for a very long time is that I think we should stop giving melee weapons like completely arbitrary downsides that don't do anything to actually balance the weapon. Like the only reason that a lot of melees have a downside at all is because Valve realized, like, oh wait, it doesn't have red text yet, we can't have this be an upgrade from stock. But in my opinion, you can, and then you just give the stock weapon, like, a very minor additional stat, like it crits on the third hit guaranteed, or you deploy it slightly faster or something. So that way we don't have to pretend like every single melee has to have a 5% firing speed penalty just so people don't get mad that there's no color red on the thing. Anyway, sorry, that's off topic. As far as this would go, I still think this would make it end up a little bit weak. Again, it would still have the damage penalty. I think, let me do the math on that really fast. Yeah, this would make it do 70 damage on a mini crit instead of the 65 that you normally do. So I don't know if that extra 5 damage is really changing the needle here. Maybe if you made it just do double damage outright, like it does, what's the base damage of this thing, like 50 something, like 52? So if it just does 104 on the first hit, then like maybe that's worth it. But I like this direction for it. I'll give this a 3.5 out of 5. Maybe just a 3, and maybe we'll like retroactively bump the other one down to 2, because I think this is a full point higher, but it's only a 3. It's okay. It's a good direction to take it. I think, again, like the first hit doing more damage is like one of the better redesign ideas, but I think this specific one still leaves it too weak. New idea for the Volcano Fragment. Meter that builds with damage, we'll call it Krakatoa or something. When full, you right-click to do the Guitar Shred taunt, like almost every other Pyro melee, and your surrounding teammates will do fire damage for 8 seconds while the weapon is active. Okay, when you say do fire damage, I'm guessing you mean inflicting afterburn, and not like it literally changes the damage type to fire, so that way the Vaccinator medic has to like change resistances or something. This would be interesting, I guess, but this also just seems really annoying to play against. There's a reason that TF2 doesn't have any sort of damage over time tied to a hit scan weapon, and that's because you want to be able to dodge the damage over time if it's coming at you from long range. And I think allowing your team's heavy to inflict 8 seconds of afterburn per minigun bullet, as cool as that may be, would just be really, really frustrating to play against. Because there's nothing that you can really do to avoid that damage in the same way you can, like, if a Pyro shooting flares at you from across the map. But anyway, even though this would, like, turn the Volcano Fragment into a decent team support weapon, I don't think this would end up being that good. Like, you'd set entire groups of people on fire, which would be really cool. Or you could use the Scorch Shot and do the same thing. So, like, it is kind of adding extra steps to, like, the same thing Pyro can already do. It's just, like, now instead of just being a redundant flamethrower, it's also a redundant Scorch Shot if you pair it with the best possible case scenario. I don't hate this one, but I really don't love it either. I'll give it a 2 out of 5. I think that, again, you really don't want hit scan weapons at all that deal damage over time. Sorry to break it to the grouch heads out there that were really excited to use the Le Executor, but we just don't want that in TF2. It's just not possible. The Sharpened Volcano Fragment is an obvious pick, but I think the only good way to balance it is to make it another support melee for Pyro. Instead of destroying sappers to increase his ability to counter spy, it could more straightforwardly support his team. The Fragment will extinguish allies on hit as well as setting them on fire. However, this version of Afterburn heals the same amount as it would damage along the same times intervals. Oh god, that seems like a nightmare to decode visually. unless you made the fire like scorching flames green to show that it was healing fire. I don't know. Like, that just sounds like a very confusing thing in, like, an actual team fight. Anyway, additionally, it would prevent that ally from receiving afterburn, though they would still take the same amount of damage from flamethrowers. This friendly afterburn effect would only work on one ally at a time, but it would be removed and placed onto another ally should the Pyro using the Fragment hit them instead. So, okay, on top of the thing that I just mentioned, when you say that it prevents them from receiving afterburn, so, okay, this would effectively be 8 healing per second, which is 1/3 the healing of the Medigun. So that's not good. I mean, it is like afterburn prevention. It does, I mean, effectively counter Pyro's ability to spam Scorch Shot flares, but only kind of. Because considering this is still fire, I'm guessing you'd still eat 90 if you were on good fire and, like, took a flare. But this is, like, very interesting, actually. Again, my main concern is just the visual noise this could potentially cause by having to, like, decode 10 different types of fire in TF2. But, as, like, a way to allow your team to heal a little bit, basically one teammate at a time, it's not bad. It's almost like, I guess the best comparison that I could give is that it's a Zenyatta orb from Overwatch, where you, like, tie it to one teammate and it slowly heals them, and then you can deal damage in the meantime. And because I know someone's going to say, like, oh, well, that's an Overwatch thing. This is TF2. You shouldn't add Overwatch things into TF2. Why not? We have 10 years of time where Overwatch has been out, where we can definitively look at which mechanics work and which ones don't. I think it's okay if we take inspiration in the opposite direction and say, you know what? This mechanic has survived the test of time, and it's really not that far-fetched to have, like, minor passive healing in TF2, so sure. But yeah, like, honestly, the more I think about this, the more I think that it does have potential. I'll give this a 4 out of 5. Again, it's really not how I would have redesigned the Volcano Fragment. I think it's, like, a very strange concept for it, but it's like, it's cool, it works. Also, I'm gonna point out too, like, this reads like the what shows Chuckle Horse changes. Like, yeah, can I have a thing that lights me on fire, but the fire is actually green and it heals me, and I can't get lit on fire while I'm on good fire? Like, that's what I think of when I see this. So maybe the what, take inspiration if you've made it this far in my video. Just kidding. I know you don't watch my videos. Fucking idiot. The Sharpened Volcano Fragment should have the inverse of the Axtinguisher, where it does a shit ton of damage to enemies not on fire while doing not that much to an enemy that's already on fire, which, yeah, is what I said earlier, that I think is probably the most logical direction to take it. I can't really give this one a rating because a shit ton of damage, quote unquote, is not really something that I can, like, mentally compare to anything else. But, yeah, I do think, like, okay, how would I tune the numbers, I guess, then, is what the question would be. So I guess let's see. Let's take thresholds. Would I be okay with this one-shotting a light class? Honestly, probably. Maybe if this did, like, 100 even on the first hit, and then if a light class doesn't find healing, they just burn out, then that's fine. I'll give this, I mean, again, no real rating, but just a good job. A gold star and a thumbs up, because I do think that's the best direction to take it. Serious take. The SVF should have bleed instead of afterburn, so it isn't completely overshadowed by the flamethrowers. Buffed. I think there, ironically, was a really good reason that we brought up when looking at Grouch's idea that was exactly this. And his wasn't even bleed instead of afterburn. It was the two stacked on top of each other. The damage over time on a melee isn't something that Pyro wants at all, because even if you apply it, even if you do, like, double damage over time with this, you still do more damage just by WM1ing. Like, there's no comparison. I don't know when I would ever want to opt for, like, a set amount of damage in 8 seconds when I could deal that same damage in, like, 1.5 seconds. It isn't really a real logical thing that Pyro would ever want to use. And the only reason that I didn't bring this up earlier during the other one is because that one had infinite afterburn, so that would at least be something that sets it apart. You could just go for a kamikaze play, and if you're playing on a map that's, like, pretty barren of health packs or water, then, like, the enemy's just dead. But this, like, if the afterburn and bleed wear off, it doesn't matter how much damage over time you do, unless that damage over time is more than WM1 damage, and that would be horrendous game design, so we shouldn't do that. So yeah, this is another one where, like, I can see why someone would want to come up with a change like this. They see the Volcano Fragment doing fire damage, which is the same as the Flamethrower, and it can't stack, so they're like, okay, well, what if it did a damage over time that could stack? Then that would be cool. But again, if it's not better than WM1, it's not a good enough thing for a melee. just scrap the idea if it loses the damage comparison to WM1. It's just not gonna happen. So I will give this probably a 2 out of 5. I think there's a lot of 2 out of 5s here, but I've not seen anything that really deserves a 1 or that, like, ascends into a 3 yet. A change to the Sharpened Volcano Fragment would be so it's able to be thrown like the Cleaver. If it's too broken, the weapon can fall faster or deal less damage or afterburn. Okay, so in concept, like, minus the problem that I'm about to say, this would be hype as fuck, because imagine, like, getting a cross-map axe hit, like you're in COD, you hit the cross-map hatchet, and then you follow that up with a cross-map crit flare to do, like, 125 damage instantly, and, like, drop their medic with a little bit of afterburn or something. That would be the coolest thing I've ever seen, minus the other things that were also the coolest thing that I've ever seen, but this is among the ranking at least. The problem with doing this, though, is that one of the biggest restrictions of TF2's branch of the Source engine is that it really, really does not like it when you don't have any sort of weapon equipped. So let's say that I run into the following scenario. I am out of flare ammo, I'm out of flamethrower ammo, and the only thing that I can use is my melee. Well, if that melee is on a meter and then I throw the melee and don't have it, then I don't have any weapons at all. And again, TF2 isn't really fond of that, and I think what it ends up doing in the rare cases where that can come up is that it just gives you your melee back instantly, and that would be a little broken if you just had, like, infinite throwable axes. Or, alternatively, it just puts you into an A pose, and, I don't know if, like, that's what we'd want to do. But the only instances that are currently in TF2 of melees that can disappear and are on a meter, which I think is really just what the Spycicle is on Spy, and Spy already has the Sapper, which is a weapon that you always have that can't go away. With the exception of MBM, which is, again, how we know, like, what the behavior of that is. But That's the reason why you can give that to some classes, but Pyro isn't one of those. In terms of just the sheer concept of like one of Pyro's melees having an igniting projectile though, I think it can work, if not only because you have the flare gun to follow up with for a guaranteed crit. Outside of that, like, it's just another flare that I don't think he really needs. And I guess out of all of the melees that you could put a stat like that on, then sure, the Volcano Fragment, which already sets people on fire at point blank, is one of the most likely that you could get away with that on. I think it's a really gimmicky solution to the problem, though, that while it might work, I think we can do better. So I'll give this a 2.5 out of 5. I think this is the first one that really deserves that specific number. Just because, again, you couldn't even do this because of technical limitations, but, like, to assume that this was an extra feature on top of just having the melee and it doesn't go on cooldown once you throw it or whatever, I just don't think it would do too much. It would like help with flare combos and be a cool way to get like clips, and that's about it. Or actually, no, there is one more use case. If you want to run like the Dragon's Fury and either a shotgun or the thermal thruster, this would be an easy way to ignite enemies like that are outside of your range to follow up with Dragon's Fury hits. So actually, okay, just because of that, I might bump it up to a 3. Yeah, no, I like this being a 3, because that really is, like, a legitimate use case that you would want to use it for, because secondary choice with the Dragon's Fury is a legitimate conundrum that having some kind of melee to free that up with, I think would be good. So yeah, like the healing one, like, it's a little on the gimmicky side, but overall, I think on the Volcano Fragment specifically, this really could work. And finally, the one that everyone has been waiting for, we are on to the Hot Hand. Actually, no, I think the Gas Passer was the one that people were waiting for. This is maybe like second or third in the queue. All right, anyway, the Hot Hand throws a hot coal like the Rap Assassin's ornament. Okay, well, I'm glad we just did the other Volcano Fragment discussion, because now I can just point to that one and say, ditto. Really, everything that I said there applies here. Although, let's see, would this be better or worse thematically for the Hot Hand? I mean, the Hot Hand, like, also doesn't really have a niche. Like, I think it's in pretty equal standing as far as just a completely nothing weapon concept that could just really fit in any extra stat for it. So sure, honestly, I think the idea of throwing a hot coal that lights enemies on fire with the glove is cute. I would buy that, right? Actually, maybe what you could do is you have the coal be on like a fairly long cooldown, or you could like have it refill with fire damage, and the coal behaves exactly like the current Scorch Shot flares do, where it like knocks enemies back, does a little bit of stun, and bounces and explodes. And then you make the Scorch Shot itself, because it's way more spammable, not have the bounce or the explosion or something. So that way, like, the coal keeps the function of the Scorch Shot, which I honestly think Pyro should be able to, like, have some sort of range knockback, just not as spammable as the current Scorch Shot lets it. So this would be a really good way to let him do that, and then rebalance the Scorch Shot elsewhere. So yeah, actually, I don't mind this one at all. Like, I know the idea of it's the flare gun number 2 is a little bit gimmicky, but at the same time, it's like, for Pyro specifically, I do think having multiple ways to light enemies on fire at a range, specifically, like the Volcano Fragment obviously is pretty useless, but at a range, would be beneficial to the class, just because there are a lot of things that he has to follow up on fire damage that are pretty cool. So yeah, I'll give this one like a 3.5 out of 5. There aren't really stats listed. I just came up with all the stats for you, but the concept works. I think this is one of the cooler ones that I've seen thematically, even if it's not like the most obvious solution to how to rework the Hot Hand. I don't know, whatever. Ooh, wait, this one's interesting. The Gas Passer and Hot Hand could be combined into a singular melee with the Hot Hand's base left click and the Gas Can being a chargeable alt fire. Both weapons are so bad that you can combine them into one in the less desired melee slot and it would still not break the meta. This is like a really cool idea on how to not waste space. Here's the problem that I have with this, though, is that I think this is like the give up solution, right? This is effectively admitting defeat on redesigning the Gas Passer specifically. Because I do think that a throwable gas can actually does have a lot of potential as far as a TF2 weapon goes. It's just that, again, what they made the Gas Passer do actually in practice is completely worthless, and the gas effect should be way more interesting, or even what it applies. Like, even if you don't want to make it apply the gas effect, like, that should be different than just afterburn, right? So I guess that would be my biggest problem, is that this is just conceding that you can't think of like any interesting ways to rebalance the gas passer, which I honestly think there are plenty of that you could test out. But I don't hate this either. I think this is, again, one of the more interesting creative ideas that I've seen for how to fix the problem of both of these weapons being bad on their own, as you just make them bad together. Because I guess that's the other thing, too. I don't really think this would do anything. Like, okay, the gas passer is effectively nothing. Like, you have nothing in your secondary slot. So adding that to your melee slot doesn't really change the fact that it is nothing. So yeah, I don't really think this would solve any actual problem. It would more just sweep it under the rug, so I'll give it like a 2.5. But the idea itself is actually pretty funny and creative, and I could see this working like better than what we have technically. So hot hand guarantees crits while blast jumping. Or, okay, well, let's talk about this one before we read the or. So the main problem that I have with this is that the hot hand attacks twice for half damage each. And with a lot of the crits while blast jumping weapons, you only really have time to get in one singular hit before you hit the ground. There's a reason the Market Gardener doesn't like attack twice for half damage each, because if it did, then it would be pretty much worthless, and I think this would be the same story here. If you made it only attack once, like, I mean, it would be a better weapon, but then it also, like, that's just a brand new weapon. I think attacking twice is the most interesting thing the hot hand has going for it, and I guess I could buy an argument that even though it's interesting, that doesn't mean that it's, like, a good template for a weapon, but I also can't really buy the idea that the glove is the thing getting crits while you're blast jumping. Like, that just doesn't make conceptual sense to me. So, all thumbs down this one. I think it would work, but it's a lazy solution. Or the hot hand head mechanic. 1% base speed boost per successful melee, up to 10 hits, with the Powerjack already being 15%, open to any reasonable number of heads as the max. Oh god, so... Why? Okay, let's ask the simple question. If that's the reason why we want people to use the item, why would I want to use the item where I have to hit enemies at point blank at melee range 10 times in a row for up to a 10% speed boost, when I could just equip the Powerjack and get a 15% speed boost? I don't know why you would ever use the hot hand in any circumstance ever. Now, if you made it so on kill, you get a permanent 10% speed boost while it's active, maybe, or maybe even on wear you could do like a 5%, and then that's stacked. Actually, no, don't do on wear a speed boost as Pyro unless you're nerfing WM1. I think that's kind of my hardline stance. But hell, even just to like give the thing that you proposed better numbers, let's say that every hit you landed added like a 2.5% speed boost. So if you landed both slaps, then that's a 5% speed boost while it's active. And that stacked up to like 25 or something. So you only have to slap enemies 5 times to get the max speed boost. That's notably faster than the Powerjack, and you still get the speed boost on hit, which I don't really think matters because it's for 1 second, but I guess this would work. Again, I don't think it's really the best that we could possibly do because it doesn't really... okay, here's the deal. I would still rather get the flat speed boost like 9 times out of 10 because the time you're using the Powerjack most often is coming back from spawn, which obviously you're not hitting that many enemies on your way back from spawn, so you're not really getting the speed boost until you hit the front lines already with the this version of the hot hand. But it's also not the worst idea that I've ever seen, and it also does like play into what the design of the hot hand already is for as little as already there. Sure, I'll give this like I'll give the second one specifically like a 2.5 out of 5 because the stats that you suggested would just be directly worse than the Powerjack and it would suck ass. But the concept is there. I think you're on the right track with it a little bit. Although again, like I've said about a lot of these, I think we could do better. The hot hand does extra damage for each successful previous hit, resetting after not dealing melee damage for 5 seconds or missing. Okay, so while most of my opinion on this would be entirely based on how much extra damage you're getting, this is, if you wanted to keep it as more of like a meme gimmick weapon, I think the best way to make it more viable while keeping the design intact, right? For context, the hot hand currently does 28 damage per hit, so pretty low. Let's say that you wanted to make it so each individual hit increased the value by like 8 damage per hit. So this would be 28 plus 36 plus 44. So that would be 108 off of 3 hits. And then we'll go ahead and add 52 for 160. So this would let you drop a medic in effectively 2 clicks, but 4 total hits, which I think... would that be okay? I mean, Pyro can already do that with the back scratcher, and that also gives healing, so yeah, sure. I wouldn't mind that. And then, let's see, if you hit a couple more times, that would be plus 60, plus 70, or 68. So that would be 288 on 6 consecutive hits with no misses, which... for context, the back scratcher does 244 in 3 hits because that's how much the crit does, and that's 3 times. So I wouldn't mind that at all. And then let's see, if you landed 4 hits in a row, you could probably drop an overhealed heavy, I think. So you'd be 2 damage short of dropping an overhealed heavy with 4 swings. Assuming no random crits. Actually, shit, maybe no random crits is a stat you would have to add if you're doing this. Because, oh god, again, I'm hyper-focusing on the math too much, but like that shows you that I like the concept, and also, you didn't give numbers, so I have to invent them to create discussion here. So maybe this would be fine? The only thing that I could think of that would make this really annoying is that, because this does give you, like, the perpetual speed boost, you are kind of able to, like, just hang on to your enemy like a leech. You can just constantly buzz around their head, I guess, like more like a mosquito. But if that is the case, then just turn off random crits and it's fine. I'm gonna be real. Oh man, I'm not gonna make this a 5 out of 5 because you didn't put numbers. I had to kind of put in the work for you, but I will put this as like a 4.5 out of 5. I genuinely think this is the best way that I've ever seen to solve the hot hand without removing, like, the meme status of it, where it's like you are walking up and slapping people. Obviously, it wouldn't be, like, the best melee ever for Pyro, but it would create, effectively, a playstyle, a melee-only playstyle for him, even if it wouldn't be strictly as good as WM1. Sure, like, I actually really like this. Maybe I'm putting a little bit too much joy and whimsy into this. Maybe it would actually suck ass. But... again, man, it's the hot hand. Like, clearly it's not meant to be a weapon that's, like, overwhelmingly meta for Pyro. I just think that it should actually reward you for doing the gimmick that it's imposing on you. So, to fix the hot hand, all you gotta do is slightly upper the damages and increase the amount of time you get on the movement speed buff. Is this actually true? Do you just have to upper the damages and it's fine? Maybe a little bit. I mean... I feel like the other design's a bit more interesting, but maybe this would be like the more boring way to achieve the same thing. So at the bare minimum, I think that it shouldn't have a damage penalty. Like if you want to be able to kill a light class in 4 hits or 2 swings, I guess, whatever. This is really weird to talk about, but like 2 clicks of the mouse and 4 connecting melee hits, you should be able to do that. Again, it is distinctly harder to do it with the hot hand, so it's not just like directly equal. You do have to gamble on hit detection 4 times and not just 2. Again, I'm not like thrilled about this. I think that it doesn't really incentivize you to actually go for melee hits. It just kind of makes it not as terrible if you do. So then let's say we gave this a damage bonus. Okay, so I won't bore you with like all of the iterations of this that I just went through, but the reasonable thresholds are you give this a 25% damage bonus. Again, still hitting twice in a row, so the individual hits do half damage, but that makes each hit do 40 damage each, and that way you could kill like a soldier in 5 hits clean, but I still don't like that because like the Scout also has melees that do about the same DPS, and they're not exactly winners, so I think you'd still want to go higher. Okay, so if you gave it a 60% damage bonus, which is insane for a melee weapon, but bear with me, you have it do 52 per melee swing. So that way, if you swing twice, you do 104 damage in all of those swings. That sounds insane. That sounds like a lot of damage, but I just remembered that what actually happens with the hot hand, the way that it works, is that it has an invisible firing speed penalty, technically. So, okay, the way that TF2, this is like a really hard thing to articulate, but the way that TF2 determines like the actual firing speed of something is the number called the firing interval. The actual like firing interval between normal melee swings, like on a weapon that's not the hot hand, is 0.65 seconds. So if you hold down M1, there is a 0.65 second gap between when the first melee swing ends and when the next melee swing begins. But because the hot hand swings twice per attack, the actual firing interval doesn't start until both of those swings are done. So what ends up happening is, how the math works out is it's like a 30-ish% damage penalty, or firing speed penalty, sorry, compared to a normal melee. But because of that, that means that how the numbers shake out is if we let it do 52 damage per hit, the firing interval of the hot hand is exactly 1 second when you add the numbers up, so that means it does 104 damage per second, compared to the stock fire axe, which does about 81 damage per second. So it would be a fairly sizable damage increase, but again, that is predicated on you having to land both hits in a row and not just a single hit. So then compare that to the flamethrower, which does, frankly, any amount of damage per second. This weapon is absurd in some of the mechanics that it has to calculate damage, but I think it's also at about like 85 damage per second, which again is reliant on a lot of stuff, but we'll just assume 85 is the baseline. So the hot hand does require you to do more things, and you can't immediately decide to air blast whenever you want, but I think that is like a good amount of damage to do, considering how close you have to be, considering the fact that you can't leave that range to get the damage, and what you're giving up. Yeah, like I think being able to kill a soldier in basically exactly, well, it's not exactly 2 seconds, like it's a little bit faster, but that would be fine. Sorry this is a lot of rambling, like I am processing this through in real time, but I think this is like an interesting concept of like, could the hot hand work as just a damaging melee? And I wouldn't mind it being that, just because, again, it kind of is meant to. Like, you do get the speed boost, and Pyro doesn't really have that many just damaging melees. So to try to figure out what the numbers you'd have to give it would be an interesting design challenge, I guess. But sure. Again, you didn't really give this any stats. I had to do all the work for you, and now my poor viewers had to listen to that entire ramble, so you don't even get a number, but yeah, I don't mind this. It's just, again, I think we could do better. I like the last one more because it's a bit more inventive. And finally, I think the very last one on here, the Hot Hands Slap Meter mechanic. Basically, it works like the Eyelander's head mechanic, but instead of increasing after kills, the slap meter increases upon slapping someone. Every successfully landed slap will increase Pyro's speed and swing speed by 2%. Speed and swing speed boost caps at 10 slaps, so 20% total boost for both. Also, to make it fair, the speed boost that you get will be permanent, so on wear, so it doesn't go away when you switch to your primary or secondary. For downsides, it's either even less damage dealt or one slap at a time, which I don't agree with that. Again, I think the only thing that the Hot Hand has going for it is that it has 2 slaps at a time, and although I'm not the biggest fan of it as it stands, like, I do think that does introduce a big enough deviation of how you have to use it that is, like, strictly negative, that you could introduce some more powerful stats to compensate that I think could be interesting. For this, like, this is kind of just a combination of the other two. I guess there isn't really much to chew on here, but I do like this as a more balanced version of the other one, which is only up to 10% while it's active. A 20% total speed boost on wear, though, is kind of insane on Pyro. Again, I'm really not fond of anything that increases Pyro's WM1 speed, just because the Phlogistinator exists. And I can see this being really, really annoying where you, like, farm up slaps on some free-to-play spy who doesn't know any better. You farm up Scorch Shots or even the Phlog meter itself on that same free-to-play spy, and then you go in with a 20% speed-boosted Phlog push, and because the medic has speed copying, he'll follow you in at the same speed. I don't think Phlog pushes should be made any better. Like, that's genuinely one of my biggest reasoning for why, like, an on-wearer speed boost as Pyro sucks. If you just delete the Phlog or rework it entirely, you could have so much more for Pyro. But yeah, I think that overall, a lot of my complaints that I had for other weapons applies here too, and I'll give this one probably like a 3 out of 5. I think it's a bit more fleshed out than the original, and if you made it not on-wearer, and you didn't reduce the damage further like you were suggesting, then it could work. It could be an alternative to the Powerjack. Again, I just think we could do better. So anyway, that is my opinions on at least a small selection of your ideas on how to rebalance Pyro. Sorry that took so long. Like I said in the beginning, though, this was about 1/20th of the actual replies that I got, so thanks to everyone that submitted them. Sorry if I couldn't fit yours in, but overall, I thought it was really cool to go through these and, I don't know, just take a more critical look at them. And hopefully I didn't sound too mean when talking about these. There were a lot of them that, like, I didn't expect to like, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized, like, actually, it's a bit unorthodox, but I really do think this could work in TF2. Like, it's not outside of the limits of what Valve themselves might do back when they were rebalancing weapons. And also, sorry this took so long to get around to. I think I actually, like, put the poll out 6 months ago, but with this being 3.5 hours with pretty consistent editing throughout it, you can imagine how much of a pain in the ass this actually was to, like, go through the entire thing. But if you liked it, let me know if you want to see this sort of thing again, and frankly, let me know if you're still awake at this point.